Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. Like, share, and subscribe. We've got a very interesting video here. This one's from Ethics Committee. We've got a couple of our favorites, Michael Cooper, Michael Barrett, a couple of great Conservative MPs. They're questioning Michael Wernick. He's the former Privy Council clerk for Justin Trudeau's cabinet. What a mess this is going to be, guys. I bet you we're going to learn a lot about Trudeau corruption in this one. Let's take a look and a listen. Let's get right into it. Smash the like, subscribe. Let's check this out.
For 5 minutes, Mr. Cooper. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wernick, I want to ask you a few questions about the Prime Minister's ethics screen. Would you agree that in terms of seeing that it is triggered, that requires an exercise in judgment that is subjective by those who are responsible for administering the screen?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well,
the onus is on a public office holder to provide information to the commissioner. It happens all the time.
No, I'm asking you, you earlier spoke about perceived conflicts of interest, and you specifically said that that requires an exercise in judgment on a subjective matter. Now, we have the Prime Minister's ethics screen that states that Mr. Carney may participate in discussions and make decisions affecting 100 free companies on matters that affect the company's interests as a member of a broad class of persons unless those interests are disproportionate to other members of a class. Now, I would note that this language of having a disproportionate interest doesn't come from the Conflict of Interest Act. It's a subjective question. It's a subjective test, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm totally comfortable that that's a job that Parliament assigns to the commissioner.
Well, the Parliament did not assign that language. That was something that was incorporated into this screen, and I would note that this language, have you seen this language in an ethics screen before? That specific language of a disproportionality test?
I think Parliament has given the commissioner the mandate to make these judgments about what is the appropriate arrangement.
I understand we have an ethics screen in place. I understand the process that led to the ethics screen. I just asked you a very straightforward question. It should be obvious that, yes, it is a subjective test. Yes, it is a subjective standard. And the fact that you can't even answer that, I find really astounding, and it really raises the question in my mind of whether you're coming here in good faith to answer questions. Now I will ask you this, and I hope you'll agree with this, that when we're talking about the Prime Minister's ethics screen, it's extensive. It's unprecedented. 103 different companies, 103 different conflicts of interest, 103 ethics screen, right?
Sorry, what's the question?
It's pretty extensive, isn't it? Unprecedented.
Yes, it's the most extensive private sector record since Paul Martin.
Well, thank you for providing, for the first time, a straightforward answer to a straightforward question. Now, given the fact that it is an extensive ethics screen, unprecedented, as you've conceded, Canadians have serious concerns about, frankly, the lack of transparency around it, to see that it is triggered when it ought to be triggered. And you served as the clerk of the Privy Council. As clerk of Privy Council, you were pretty busy on a day-to-day basis, were you not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so can you explain to me how it is that this is being left to the clerk of the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff to administer? How can Canadians have confidence that the screen is being triggered appropriately? Would you agree that there is a legitimate basis for some concern in that regard?
Well, if the committee wants to recommend disclosure of all the instances when the screen was invoked, go for it.
Well, and that's one of the problems that we have, is that right now we have no idea when the screen is invoked or not. One witness came and said that really all we have is hope and trust. Do you think hope and trust is sufficient?
No, I have my faith in the commissioner.
So your answer is that you're satisfied that hope and trust is sufficient, because that's what we have with this ethics screen.
No, those are your words, Mr. Cooper. I think Parliament has given the job to the Commissioner to make judgments about the appropriate screens and the appropriate sanctions.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't have a whole lot of trust and confidence that it is being triggered appropriately. Would you support amending the Conflict of Interest Act to provide for an enforceable general anti-avoidance measure so that anyone who circumvents the act by circumventing a technical loophole would be held accountable?
I mean, that's a question for lawyers. It would have to be linked to whatever the sanctions are for an infraction, but that's used in other laws, and you would. I don't see any problem considering it for this law either.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Mr. Warnick. Mr. Saini, you have 5 minutes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warnick, for appearing before the committee. Mr. Poliver, as a leader of the opposition, do you think it's correct that he still does not have a security clearance? And is it ethical for a party leader to keep getting a security clearance?
Well, I don't want to get drawn into partisan crossfire, but I have said publicly that I do think all party leaders of parties recognized in the House of Commons should go through security clearances, largely to do with foreign interference. But in the context that we're talking about today, going through a security clearance will reveal potential points of leverage on someone. It will reveal credit issues, financial issues, personal conduct issues, business contacts, relationships, encounters with the criminal justice system, and so on. So in fact, one of the most practical ways to deal with perceived points of pressure on decision makers is to ensure they've had a security clearance.
Thank you.
Mr. Barrett, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
To follow up on that line of questioning, if there's a potential conflict that's flagged, what's the evaluation process? What does that look like?
I'm not sure about the details. I mean, I think what happens is that items that come in are referred to specific secretariats. It might be economic, social, foreign policy, indigenous affairs, or whatever. And you have an assistant secretary, sort of an ADM level person, sorry for the jargon, and they will be looking at items coming in. Most items arrive, after several rounds of interdepartmental meetings, people from the sponsoring department coming to PCO. So you don't get very many cabinet items that arrive without prior notice, and there is some time for people to take a look at the screens and see if something needs to be actioned.
And who recommends the decision that something not? Let me rephrase. Who makes the recommendation, and to whom would they make the recommendation that the screen be invoked? And so that's something that was going to go before cabinet, not be presented with the affected public office holder being absented from the room, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't tell you for sure how it's actioned now. I left several years ago. Most cabinet business is done at committees, chaired by other ministers. So my recollection, and I stand to be corrected by people from Privy Council office, is that it would have been the assistant secretary, who's basically the secretary to each cabinet committee, and in the case of full cabinet, it is the clerk.
And so, at the end of my last round, we talked about the effectiveness of having the chief of staff or having the clerk of the Privy Council, who both serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, responsible for ensuring that that the Act isn't violated. They're the ones that are advising or protecting against this from happening. In the case of Mr. Trudeau, it didn't work. And in the case of Mr. Carney, he's got 103 potential conflicts that are flagged, and we're left with the same system, and it's left in the hands of these individuals. Now, look, they both can be long-serving and well-regarded. But the problem is who their boss is and what their function is to prevent the conflict. And in this case, the risk of a decision being made by the Prime Minister that could further his own financial interests, this goes to the heart of the erosion of confidence that Canadians have in their public institutions. Do you recognize that there is a weakness in this system?
I mean, I think you could tell the story of the last Parliament that all of those issues were detected and made public and became a subject of parliamentary discussion or investigations by the Commissioner. So at some level, the system is drawing out those issues. I don't think you can describe potential issues of perceived conflict in the future in a way that can really be legislated for with a lot of clarity. But there's just too much subjectivity.
You mentioned that there's a process in place that prevent the items from ending up on the agenda or flagging them for cabinet committees. So the record keeping and the note taking exists. Should the law require public reporting of when the screen is invoked, it wouldn't require a great lift of those involved to report it if that were what the law required.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, the remedy is rarely take the item off the agenda, it's recusal. So if there's a minister in the room that may have a perceived conflict, they'll step out for that item. And
is there a practicality? Pardon the interruption, I just a very short time.
Yep.
Is there a practicality issue when the minister in question is the first minister? And these are like massive concerns or massive issues that are being considered?
Yeah, as I said to a previous question, I have no objection or problem with you writing specific rules for the Prime Minister's office, given that the Prime Minister plays a particular role, in cabinet. And I have no problem with your suggestion, but what I would suggest is that those invocations of the screen be disclosed to the Commissioner.
That's
and
it.
the Commissioner can come to a view what they want to do about it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wernick.
All right, gang, we're going to wrap it up right there. These committee meetings are always very interesting. The investigations lead to a lot of answers, even more questions, perhaps.
Rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
In Bermuda, and the $5 billion catalytic
Point of
transition
order.
fund where he registered it in the Cayman Islands. Do I have that right?
Hang on, Mr. Cooper. Point of order, Ms. Church, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if we can ask yourself as the chair to please illuminate how this line of questioning is relevant to the study of this committee, which pertains to a review of the Conflict of Interest Act.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. We're going back to committee. This is ethics investigations, and they're trying to find out, does Mark Carney have a single ethic? We've got our man Michael Cooper, backed up by Michael Barrett, attacked by MP Leslie Church, who is covering up for the boss. She's a liar. You can just tell she's a phony person. Let's get into this. These committee investigations are always interesting. The Liberals are shameless. Once you have the toothpaste out of the tube, you can't get it back in. Once you see these Liberals in action, you cannot forget it. They are trying to destroy our culture, covering up for our lame Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Let's take a peek.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
You are next from the Conservative Party. 5 minutes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Ward, Brookfield owns substantial investments in Canada and is the largest owner of commercial properties in major cities across Canada, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that Brookfield has reaped very large profits from its investments in Canada?
That would be correct, although I just in terms
and
of
while Brookfield has reaped large profits in Canada, it has paid relatively little in the way of Canadian taxes, correct?
Correct.
And help me understand how Brookfield avoids paying taxes in Canada. As I understand it, Brookfield sets up a complex web of foreign subsidiaries in which investment funds ultimately end up in Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, and other tax havens, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that's precisely what Mark Carney did when he was the chair of Brookfield, when he set up the $10 billion or $15 billion Global Transition Fund. He registered it in Bermuda. The $10 billion second Global Transition Fund, he registered it in Bermuda. And the $5 billion Catalytic Transition Fund, where he registered it in the Cayman Islands. Do I have that right?
Hang on, Mr. Cooper. Point of order, Ms. Church, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if we can ask yourself as the chair to please illuminate how this line of questioning is relevant to the study of this committee, which pertains to a review of the Conflict of Interest Act, and not about either the tax dealings of any particular individual or of tax law, frankly, generally.
Okay, so I've been chairing this committee for almost 3 years now. I generally give a lot of latitude, as we do in the House, for members of the committee to use their time. And I do expect Mr. Cooper, as a seasoned member of this committee, that he will come back and bring this back to where it needs to go. And I would give as much latitude to you, Ms. Church, as I'm giving to Mr. Barrett, or Mr. Cooper right now. On the same point of order, Mr. Barrett, I've stopped the time too, by the way. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett. I don't engage in debate on this.
No, but it was about whether this pertains to the motion. I'm not sure, Chair, if perhaps you could read the motion or have Ms. Church read the motion back into the record. Tax havens is specifically spelled out. Carried interest payments, this is very relevant to the application of the Conflict of Interest Act. And so it's the line of questioning it's very clear to see where it's leading, but it also speaks directly to the motion. So I appreciate your ruling with respect to latitude, but I don't think respectfully that any latitude is required. Mr. Cooper is engaged in a line of questioning that goes to the heart of the matter that we're studying, and that's why we have this expert.
I appreciate that intervention, Mr. Barrett. I'm not going to reread the motion. I think all the members are clear of where this is going. We are studying the Conflict of Interest Act as it relates to designated public office holders, and perhaps the recommendations will come in the response. Recommendations of the committee and the report will come from some of the responses that Mr. Ward gives to Mr. Cooper's questions. Mr. Cooper, you have 3 minutes and 49 seconds to continue your questioning. Go ahead.
So to the witness, did I get that right with respect to Mark Carney setting up 3 major multi-billion-dollar clean energy funds from Brookfield in tax havens, including Bermuda and the Cayman Islands?
I can't speak to the specifics of those particular funds, but it would seem par for the course.
Okay, thank you very much. On page 12 of your report, there is reference to Brookfield's tax gap over the last 5 years between 2017 and 2021. Just so that I'm clear on what a tax gap means, it is measuring the difference between taxes actually paid and taxes that would have been paid if the statutory Canadian tax rate had been applied to profits reaped. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And according to your analysis, or the analysis cited in your report, Brookfield's tax gap in just 5 years between 2017 to 2021 was over $6.5 billion. Is that right?
That's correct, and that was based on research done by the Canadians for Tax Fairness and by some analysis from the Toronto Star as well.
So it would be fair to say that the extent of Brookfield's tax avoidance, taxes that it should have otherwise paid in Canada in just 5 years, was over $6.5 billion.
Yes, I mean, the tax gap is looking at the statutory rate, and there are some reasons why legitimate reasons why companies pay below that, but that's an indication of a major underpayment of taxes that, in the spirit of the law, should have been paid in Canada to finance public services in Canada.
Yeah, I'd say $6.5 billion is a lot of money. Would it be fair to say that Brookfield is Canada's largest tax dodger amongst corporations?
It has been labeled as such, and if it's not the largest, it's clearly in the very top tier.
Well, your report cites 123 of Canada's largest corporations, and it found that the largest tax gap for 2017 to 21 was none other than Brookfield, right?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You still have a minute, Mr. Cooper. If you're,
Okay, well, I would just ask the witness if he can just elaborate on why it is in his submissions that a blind trust is not an appropriate mechanism.
in 45 seconds, sir.
Well, I think because there's still the ability to profit from something in a blind trust, even if you don't know the details of what's going on, you're benefiting from the actions that might be taken by somebody else on your behalf.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Next, we're going to go to Ms. Church from the Liberal Party for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Church.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ward, so you started off your remarks by saying that you're not an expert on Canada's Conflict of Interest Act. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you know who is covered by Canada's Conflict of Interest Act?
I'm assuming that it relates to public officials, but I have not read the act. I am an expert on tax havens and other using various schemes to avoid tax.
So you would agree then that it doesn't cover corporations, that it's not the intent of the act? The intent of the act is to cover public office holders?
I do not have the knowledge to respond to that adequately.
Well, let's talk about blind trusts then, if you're not familiar with the act itself. Are you aware that investments that are entered into a blind trust are fully disclosed before they're put into a blind trust by a public office holder?
That the investments are disclosed before entering into a blind trust?
Correct.
Yes.
So those, just for the sake of transparency, those assets then are known. The public office holder then puts them into a blind trust so that from that point forward, they no longer have control over those assets. Correct?
Right.
That's right. So a public office holder then would have no awareness over the performance or even the composition of the assets that were in a blind trust once that trust is established. Correct?
Yes, but they would benefit from actions taken by others on their behalf in profits that might be derived into that.
Now, how would they know that if they didn't know what the composition of the blind trust was?
Well, I think there's an example here that is very relevant south of Canada with the situation of the Trump administration profiting from deals that are being constructed by his children. That's not a blind trust situation.
But you understand the actual responsibilities of the trustee of a blind trust, which is that they have the authority, fiduciary authority over the trust and the assets in that trust to make changes to it, to sell those assets. That a person who establishes a trust actually is prevented under Canadian conflict of interest legislation from providing direction to the trustee. So the public office holder who establishes the trust actually does not have control, has not provided any guidance to the trustee, and has no awareness as to the composition of that trust following its establishment. You're aware of that in the Canadian context?
I'm aware of that in the Canadian context. However, if you look at the case of big four accounting firms who also have created legal situations where information is not supposed to transfer from one part of the business to another, it has. And so I do
Mr. Ward,
think
what relevance does that have to the Canadian Conflict of Interest Act that covers public office holders in the Canadian Parliament?
It's a parallel situation in which rules that exist are abused because there's information.
Is there an ethics commissioner that is governing private sector blind trusts or whatever situation it is you're talking about in big accounting firms? Is there a publicly funded, determined ethics commissioner and office responsible for oversight in those cases?
In some jurisdictions, yes.
In Canada?
I'm not familiar with the Canadian law.
No, there is not. There is no public ethics commissioner that oversees those. That is a role of Parliament. When a public officer has a blind trust, is that public office holder shielded from tax for any gains or losses that may be incurred of the assets in that trust?
Well, it depends on how the investments in the blind trust are structured, doesn't it?
Well, I think the answer there is no, that tax law actually applies to the assets that are controlled by a blind trust, and it is the fiduciary, the trustee in this case, that is actually responsible for the tax management of those assets. Is that not correct?
There are huge amounts of loopholes, which you've just been discussing, that are in the tax law that allow individuals and corporations to significantly reduce their tax obligations under legal provisions in the law that we've just been discussing.
Now, Mr. Ward, I'm sure that you can help me distinguish between what is general tax law or international tax law and what I'm asking you, which is for an individual that has assets in a blind trust, those assets are subject to tax law. Yes or no?
Of course they're subject to tax law.
Of course they are subject to tax law.
But is the tax law an effective mechanism in order for them to pay the appropriate amount of tax?
But Mr. Ward, I don't want to seem too disagreeable with you, but I guess I'm trying to draw a distinction between the case of an individual public office holder, a parliamentarian who puts their assets in a blind trust for the purpose of...
I'm going to have to get you to wrap up.
Okay.
Quick
For the purposes of being able to represent public office, different from any concerns that an individual like yourself may have about tax law generally, which we can all as parliamentarians accept is worthy of debate, but is a completely separate situation from what we're talking about here.
We're 40 seconds over. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to respond, Mr. Ward, please.
Thank you.
I think there's a moral obligation to show leadership in avoiding conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest and being clear.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Thank you, Ms. Church. We were a minute over.
Oh, yeah. Wrap it up right there, gang. Aaron, Canadian Looney, Michael Cooper, Michael Barrett. What a great team. John Broussard is one of the best chairs, one of my favorite. Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. My sister has lived in Houston, Texas for the last 15 years. That's where the hat comes from, and it fits well. We're going to check this out. We've got some conservative MPs exposing the Liberals for what they are. We're going to have Michael Barrett, Michael Cooper, Melissa Lantzman, and we've got Ezra Levant from Rebel News having an altercation with our health minister, who is a disaster. She's no medicine woman. She's a voodoo woman. Wait and see. She's embarrassing. Let's check out these videos. We've got a lot to watch here. They're all pretty short pieces, so stay tuned for the next one. Let's get into this. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Let's see what the Conservatives are going to expose in this video. It's a lot. Let's go.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Mark Carney and the Liberals have a censorship agenda. This Liberal government has repeatedly abused the power of the state to silence voices and perspectives that they don't like, trampling on the freedom of speech and freedom of expression of Canadians. As you probably know, the Liberals passed Bill C-11, which gives Liberal-appointed bureaucrats the power to limit what Canadians can view and listen to online. And then there's Bill C-63, which could subject Canadians to house arrest for hate speech, not for something they actually said, but for something someone thinks they might say sometime in the future. But here's a Liberal censorship law you may not have heard about. It's actually a pretty big deal, but it hasn't received the attention and scrutiny that some of these other bills have. And that's because the Liberals quite deliberately snuck this censorship law into an omnibus budget bill at the 11th hour, hoping that Canadians wouldn't notice. I'm talking about the gag law in Bill C-59 targeting Canada's energy sector. This gag law makes it all but impossible for Canadian energy companies to tell Canadians, to tell investors, and to tell the world about their significant progress towards environmental sustainability, including their successes in reducing emissions.
We work hard to do the right thing. It is patently unreasonable to expect a company to spend tens of millions of dollars, as we are doing, to go well beyond compliance into a place of discretionary, voluntary leadership and not be able to shout from the mountaintop the good things that we're doing. It's patently unreasonable to expect that of any company.
This law would invite every word, every syllable of an environmental benefit claim by a company to be challenged before the competition tribunal.
It sounds like this legislation makes it dangerous to speak up about your environmental work.
The challenge is in the way the legislation was drafted, it comes with this consequences that creates enormous and unfair legal risk, reputational damage risk for companies that are trying to do the right thing. And so what do? They stop doing the right thing.
And here is where it gets crazy. Truth is not a defense. It is not enough for a company to establish that its environmental representations are truthful. You heard that right. Under the Liberals' anti-energy gag law, the truth doesn't matter, facts don't matter. Instead, the onus is on companies to establish that their environmental benefit claims are based on an adequate and proper substantiation, whatever that means, in accordance with a so-called internationally recognized methodology that very conveniently isn't defined in the law.
Instead of getting that clarity, what they got was confusion. And in some cases, those standards weren't widely understood. There was no guidance accompanying those standards. And I think the business community had a lot of legitimate concerns about how to apply them in practice.
Companies that fail to substantiate their claims based on this undefined, internationally recognized methodology can face punitive fines of up to $15 million per representation. And to top it off, this liberal anti-energy gag law opens the floodgates to radical environmental groups to bring forward frivolous actions against energy companies before the competition tribunal. Before this law, only the independent commissioner of competition could seek an order against a business under the applicable provisions of the Competition Act. But now, under the Liberals' anti-energy gag law, non-governmental and not-for-profit groups have a new private right of action. So it's obvious what is going on here. This is all about shutting down truthful and evidence-based information about Canada's energy sector that gets in the way of the Liberals' radical, anti-energy, keep-it-in-the-ground agenda. And any company that dares to step out of line risks being tied up in litigation, harassed by radical environmental groups, subsidized with taxpayer dollars by Mark Carney's Liberals, and forced to defend the truth against a vague and completely subjective standard, failing which they risk being hit with punitive multi-million-dollar fines. It's draconian, it's Orwellian, and it's exactly what the Liberals are all about: controlling Canadians through censorship to advance their radical agenda.
And we're squandering, I think, the opportunity as a country writ large to do some of the things that we should be doing really well.
Mm-hmm. So just back to the election quickly. You mentioned the collapse of the NDP as probably the primary reason that the Conservatives didn't win more seats, right? A lot of people talk about Trump's involvement, the tariffs being one of those policies that came out around that time because he just got elected. Did that have any role in the loss of the Conservative Party?
Yeah, sure. I think I think Trump wanted a weaker negotiating partner, and I think he said that part out loud, and I think he said it out loud for everybody to hear. We're worse off today than and every month since the election. We've got more tariffs, and we're paying higher tariffs on almost every sector, certainly steel and aluminum and canola and all of these things that are new. Like you have a guy who said that he would be the negotiator with Trump, and I think Canadians are worse off. I think that's the case with everything. We've got a federal, well, we don't have a federal budget yet, but we've got the budget watchdog saying that where the public accounts are is we're in the deficit territory of $68.5 billion right now. This is bigger than Trudeau, right? Like this is bigger than the most expensive prime minister in history. I've heard it's even going to approach $100 billion. Well, look, I don't know where it's approaching, but we saw it at 51.7 in the last iteration, and that would have been half the year, and then 68.5. So that's a 32% increase from that time, and a lot of campaign promises, a lot of spending promises. So look, this is, I don't need to explain to you and probably none of the people that listen to you, but like higher spending equals deficits equals inflation equals, less money in your pocket, or at least the value of the money in your pocket worth less.
Mm-hmm. Which is a hidden tax from consumers.
It is a tax. It is a food tax. We've got, food inflation is out of control in this country. Like you can see it in the community that I represent, which is traditionally like not the first community in the country. And I say that understanding like how lucky we are here. Not the first community in the country that would have, food insecurity issues. Right. But we have families that, that can't put food on the table. We've got food inflation at 70% above the inflation target. Add in all kinds of dietary restrictions and the tariff cost of bringing that in, and you've got a recipe for disaster in communities that traditionally didn't feel it before.
Kosher food, for example, I keep kosher.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm telling you, like double. Everything's almost double over the last few years. It's
and
crazy.
you're looking on an average grocery bill. If you're a family of four, you're looking at $700 more this year than last year.
Wow.
Like that's
for the average Canadian.
For the average Canadian family of four.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So take out all the special occasions, take out all of the special days that you want to celebrate as a family. Take out the holidays, and you're looking at $700 just to feed yourself.
Wow. Maybe we'll get you into a little bit of trouble here, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on Trump as president of the United States, just generally.
Look, as a Canadian, it is an incredibly difficult conversation to have, because a traditional relationship that had both parties on both sides of the border enjoying a very, very close friendship, like strategic, military, people to people ties, entirely free trade, with all of those things. And the uncertainty around them, it is really, really hard as a Canadian to think of anything else rather than our own resilience and a self-reliance on the things now that we have to build here. I think Trump, for me, more than anything, is a wake-up call as to the opportunity that we have in this country and what we have managed to squander. And I say the royal we, as what in the last 10 years, what the Liberal government has managed to squander in this country in terms of building ourselves up. So, almost a thankfulness for a guy that took a guy down south to remind us what we truly have here and the potential that we have here.
That's a great answer. Because I'm also of two minds, because I tend to lean more conservative myself.
Yeah.
And Trump, governs as a conservative for all his foibles and flaws. That's what he does. And a strong America generally means a strong Canada, a strong Israel. The United States is a bulwark against all the terrible ideologies and countries that would do us harm, right? So that generally is good. But obviously, you look at how he's been treating Canada,
sure,
and it's a different thing entirely. And obviously, I'm Canadian. I live here.
I love this. I love this country so much. I think I won the birth lottery for being born here. So I'm the second kid of a family. So first one in my family to have been born here, and I just don't want to give up on this country. So no matter how much I think things are broken, I also think that there is so much ingenuity in this country to be able to fix them. And I think that sometimes it takes a guy like Donald Trump to remind us of that.
Right. So you mentioned you're willing to fight for Canada. You're staying here. Obviously,
I'm staying.
A leader. You're in the fight.
Yeah. If I'm packing my bags, then we're in real trouble. So I'm not going anywhere.
You let me know. Yeah,
I'm not going anywhere. You're gonna have to drag me out of here.
That's great, and we need people like you really to really fight for Canada. I'll tell you, about a few years ago, I'd say before the COVID restrictions, it was unthinkable for someone like me, for many of my friends, family, to consider leaving Canada. Canada was never perfect, no country is perfect, but it wasn't really a discussion point. Now, just about everyone I know, and I know a lot of people in all different walks of life, anyone who can leave is trying to leave Canada. The brain drain is very real. It's not a new thing. I think it's accelerated. Capital and people, talented people, those who have options are leaving Canada. How do we stop that?
Look, you certainly see the capital outflow, and there's lots of things we can do on the tax side, on the investment side, on the developing our own sort of God-given resources in this country. On the people side, I think it's a little bit different, and you worry about the ones that you lose because they're the job creators, they're the innovators, they're the ones that take risks. Mm-hmm. I think it's really, really hard to just uproot your life and move somewhere, and I think it's not an option for many, many people, right. Both from a family and life perspective, and then from a regulatory perspective. Of some of them probably work in jobs that are regulated. It's not so easy to get credentialed in other countries. It's never has been. I think we have to do everything in order to keep people here. And again, that's on the investment on the tax side, but it's also on just the cost of living, on the cultural issues here, on the getting the sense back of like bravado that you can do anything, like you can be from any family, any background, any walk of life. And if you worked hard and you did everything right, we've got to be able to provide that dream. And that dream has to do with home ownership. And that dream has to do with opportunities in the workforce. And that dream has to do with stopping to put forward a lot of these policies that are making it impossible for people.
Oh, yeah. So the Act defines divestment to include keeping assets in a blind trust. It's a loophole. I don't think for a second that when Canadians hear that someone says, well, I've divested my assets, so the question of conflicts of interest, the questions of transparency have all been answered. Isn't it time that we require that the Prime Minister and party leaders fully sell controlled assets within 30 days of taking office? So we're being specific here. We're not talking about their home, but controlled assets.
That again is a policy proposal. It's certainly worthy of discussion. I'll simply note the following things: that the member's right, divestment is defined to include not divestment, which is a challenge. The second thing is the Commissioner has told us that the assets in these blind trusts are not mixing or churning the way one would expect them to, which does create a problem that people then know what's in their blind trust when the whole purpose of the trust is they're not supposed to. And I'll add that I do agree with the Commissioner that if there is to be mandatory real divestment, not blind trusts, that a solution would be to offset or compensate public office holders so they're made whole. The taxes on capital gains go to the Crown anyway, so the Crown can easily forego those for the sake of making the Conflict of Interest Act work if that's what Parliament decides is necessary.
And there are currently costs that go with the management of blind trusts as well. Who pays to manage the trust?
The Crown.
You talked about the Act being, quote, toothless. So if we were to give it real teeth by allowing meaningful fines, and you did speak to some of what you thought was material or immaterial in terms of amounts, and you referenced jail time. You said that there's no one's getting arrested, no one's paying fines. Would $10,000 fines for serious ethical breaches, instead of just limiting penalties to paperwork errors, do you think that would serve as sufficient deterrent for the people who'd hold these offices?
No, I think that making something an offense and allowing for prosecution and conviction by the courts with real fines or imprisonment is the way to do it. But I'll add that, Chair, in response to the question, I have to say that may mean that some things go out of the law. The problem with making this an act and not having penalties is that you're actually giving the illusion that it means something, right? Every other time, most of the times Parliament enacts something, it adds penalties. We have laws that govern marine transportation, our railways, our airports, our customs and all that. And generally when Parliament legislates, those who break the rules are subject to either administrative monetary penalties or most often prosecution and real penalties. The problem with this act is it's kind of illusory. It looks like it means something because it's in an act, but it's not there. So the answer to the question is I think there should be real penalties, including the possibility of jail time, but that may mean that some rules have to be stripped out of the act if they are the kind of rules that ought not to be amenable to those harsher consequences.
Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the statement you talk about Canada-U.S. cooperation. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your U.S. counterpart, has written saying he thinks that there's some medical research value in these ostriches because they had avian flu, but then have recovered and are now immune. In fact, he's offered to do the research and even to pay for it. It seems to me that we need allies around Trump's cabinet table. And if you could throw him a bone and say, sure, Secretary Kennedy, you can study these birds, it's sort of no skin off Canada's nose. And don't you think it would be helpful to have an ally in Trump's cabinet when we're doing our trade negotiations?
Prochaine question, merci.
That's my question. Don't you think it would be helpful to have a friend?
Next reporter, merci.
Oh, you're not going to answer, Minister?
Prochaine question, merci.
I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?
Next question, thank you.
Minister, did I miss an answer? I don't get it. Okay, I'll sit down. I guess it's question period, not answer period.
Merci beaucoup.
All right, gang, we'll wrap it up there. Aaron, Canadian Looney. At some point, these liberals are going to be held accountable.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Mr. Shukevich, you have operated as a key organizer for the longest ballot committee and served as the official agent for many of the candidates affiliated with the longest ballot committee, correct?
That is correct.
And your brother, Kieran Shukevich, also is an organizer with the longest ballot committee, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I want to ask you some questions about the recruitment of candidates and the collection of nomination signatures for the longest ballot committee. When you and other organizers from the longest ballot committee were collecting signatures, at times electors would have been presented with multiple nomination forms to sign simultaneously.
That's correct.
Okay. And as you went about collecting signatures and recruiting candidates, the longest ballot committee told prospective candidates that they didn't have to worry about collecting signatures because the longest ballot committee already had collected the 100 or more signatures needed for them to get onto the ballot. Isn't that true?
No, that's not true. You have that a little bit backwards. So we recruit candidates, we get all their names, and then we collect signatures for them. We're not like just collecting signatures for people who said they don't want to run.
So I have a video
Okay.
that you posted on YouTube to the longest ballot committee on August 18th, 2024, in respect of the LaSalle-Imard-Verdun by-election, in which you state that if we're going to break the record for the longest ballot, we need everyone to sign up as soon as possible. We've already collected 100 nomination signatures for you. All you have to do is follow the instructions. So, in fact, you and other organizers for the longest ballot committee were going around with nomination forms that didn't have candidates' names on them. Isn't that correct?
That is not correct.
I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Shukevich, because I have a tweet that was posted by the longest ballot committee on January 22nd, 2024, of you, of Kieran, and of I believe, a Glenn McDonald.
Yep.
And when you look more closely, this is you. We see where the candidate's name is on the nomination form with signatures. The candidate's name is blank. So that's precisely what you were doing, was going out and collecting signatures, getting electors to sign blank nomination forms, not candidate nomination forms.
That is not accurate.
Well, I just present you with evidence, documentary evidence, that establishes that, in fact, it is accurate. And I want to caution you, sir, but you're testifying before a parliamentary committee, and you have an obligation to answer my questions fully and truthfully. And if you fail to do so, sir, you can be held in contempt of Parliament. And I want to make clear to you that I will not hesitate in using all of the tools available to hold you accountable should you not provide truthful and accurate answers, which up till now you have not. So I'm going to give you one last opportunity to confirm on the record that you went about collecting signatures from electors where the candidate's name was blank. That's what you did, right?
No, that is not accurate. If you would give me a chance to actually respond, you've made quite a few incorrect assumptions here. Where would you like me to begin? With the AI doctored images or with your misunderstanding of what sign up means? So in that video, when I say sign up, what I'm referring to is that these are candidates who have already expressed that they want to run. We then collected their signatures with the candidate name at the top. Obviously, that's the rule.
It's not at the top.
It was at the top. I was there.
Yes, it was not at
And
the
then
top.
when we say we already have your signatures, you need to finish signing up, that is referring to fill out your forms, book a appointment with the returning officer to do your declaration. Like, this is very straightforward. You have it kind of mixed up. If you want to talk about those AI manipulated photos, I'm happy to do so.
These are, I don't have anything mixed up. What I have are
Respectfully, you do have that
a
mixed up.
YouTube video.
If I can for a moment, Mr. Shukevich.
Yeah.
We operate here on a position that members of Parliament are honourable, and to accuse a member of Parliament of doctoring images, I think you should tread very carefully in that. I don't know about these images, but I'm giving you a warning in terms of, I don't find it funny, sir. I don't think you should find it funny either. Mr. Cooper is correct in what Parliament can do, and perhaps you don't have respect for the individuals sitting at these chairs. Please have respect for the institution and the electors that put us here. Sorry, Mr. Cooper. I think we stopped about 30 seconds. Yeah, no. We have never collected signatures with blank candidate names. The Chief Electoral Officer has already testified to you that there's no credible evidence of any
Chief Electoral Officer in his testimony said that your committee initially got caught doing precisely just that. That was his testimony.
Respectfully, Mr. Chair, that it was not his testimony. His testimony was that we collected without an identified candidate, which is true. We wrote all candidates were in the candidate field, and we got people to sign. We said, would you be willing to nominate any and all candidates?
That's what you did. You just admitted it.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you. We'll
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
You for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Well, good morning, Commissioner. I have questions for you about legislation Bill C-8. There have been a pretty broad chorus of voices that are concerned about the sweeping and secret powers that cabinet ministers would have over the internet access and telephone access for individual Canadians, the power to secret powers to seize private data without warrant and conceal those actions from the public. So would secret orders to disable an individual's telecommunications access be inconsistent with the principles of the Privacy Act, and if so, why, sir?
Thank you for the question. So in the last Parliament, I appeared on Bill C-26 and talked about some of these issues when legislation aims at giving more power to the state to protect infrastructure and to disable and to take certain steps. And as Commissioner, I've always stated that privacy is not an obstacle to public interest. It's not an obstacle to national security or to strong economy. But we need to make sure that by protecting national security, we're not doing so at the expense of privacy. And so in cases like this, what I said to the committee was that we needed to put in the legislation a criterion on necessity and proportionality, making sure that the exercise of those powers is going to be tested from a privacy perspective to say, is this necessary? Does it achieve the result for which it's been put in place? And is it proportional? So that's the substantive element. And you mentioned secrecy. In certain instances, secrecy is necessary, but it should be challenged, and there should be ways for some reports to be made to appropriate authorities. It doesn't have to be necessarily that may make it public, but reports to my office, reports to a national committee of parliamentarians, or other means.
And so in your review of this proposed legislation, does it check all of those boxes?
Well, I will be waiting to testify on C8 when called, and we're reviewing that very, very carefully. But there is, I think, more to be done in terms of the reporting mechanism and the necessity and proportionality.
I would say for sure that there's more to be done. This bill proposes to let the government secretly cut a Canadian's phone or internet service, and the cabinet minister would have the power to issue the order, would prohibit that the existence of the order to cut that service prohibit its revelation, and that the order even existed, which would, of course, eliminate the ability for anyone, including you in your role as commissioner, to have any oversight whatsoever. Isn't this a direct circumvention of the act over which your mandate is concerned?
Well, that's why, again, to make sure that we're not making more difficult to raise rights and to protect privacy, reporting to appropriate authority, even if done in a confidential manner, is something that I recommend. Making sure that there is ability for my office to be aware of it, to be able to raise questions. In some instances, a report to Parliament is appropriate. A report to committee is appropriate. And so this should be part of the discussion and the assessment to say, what type of reporting is there? Is it enough? But certainly, in my view, there should be confidential reporting to some authority who would be able to raise questions about it.
Currently, that doesn't exist in the legislation. What you're describing, what you describe as essential, is not included in the legislation. Bill C-8 lets a minister compel data without judicial oversight. So this also creates a risk of a parallel system where Canadians' personal information, their personal data, can be seized in secret, again, with no redress by individual Canadians or by your office. Isn't this antithetical to the type of system that your office has been designed to protect?
Well, if my office is not aware of something happening, of course, we can't raise questions about it. We can't assist Canadians. And so I think, again, there will be instances where making something known to the public may not be appropriate, but we should challenge a claim to absolute secrecy. We should make sure that there's appropriate reporting to the appropriate authorities and that there is an appropriate means to raise questions.
Right. Of course, if your office doesn't know that the law is being broken, then I guess the government's contention is that they haven't broken the law. Do you think that a vague standard like, quote, any threat, which is the term used in the legislation, undermines safeguards in the Privacy Act, such as the requirement that collection or use must be necessary, proportionate, and authorized by law?
Well, we've advocated in the past, and as I say, I expect to be called specifically on this bill to address it, but as a general proposition, I recommend a necessity and proportionality to be in the legislation, made explicit, so that there's a strong test. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barron. Mr. Dufresne, Monsieur Sarr.
Oh, yeah.
Turn. Second round. Mr. Cooper, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, the charter jurisprudence based upon the Supreme Court's 2014 Spencer decision and the more recent 2024 Bykovitz decision is clear. Access to personal data requires prior judicial authorization, correct?
Yes, those were the findings of the court.
Okay, and looking at the Bykovitz decision, the court confirmed that subscriber data is, quote, the key to unlocking a person's identity and online activity, and based upon that, the court affirmed that even IP addresses attract a reasonable expectation of privacy and therefore cannot be obtained without a warrant, correct?
Well, that was a finding in that case. Again, the argument was this information is not specific enough, so we can ask and obtain it. And in the court really found that we can draw so much about individuals with these types of data points, and so in that case found that a warrant was required.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And to satisfy, in order to obtain a warrant, or a production order in this type of context, the standard that would have to be met is reasonable belief. Is that correct?
Reasonable belief, there's some instances where under the law it will be reasonable suspicion. So I think that is where some of my recommendations are, to the effect that when we're talking about sensitive information, it should be reasonable belief. We should have a more rigorous standard to assess that.
Okay. So with that in mind, I want to ask you some questions about parts 14 and 15 of the Liberal government's Bill C-2, buried within the so-called Strong Borders Act, are sweeping new powers to government agencies to demand Internet subscriber data. For example, Section 487.0121 of the Criminal Code, the proposed section, would allow police and CSIS officers to demand customer information from any company providing public services, including banks, telecoms, and social media, on a mere suspicion without judicial authorization. Have I got that right?
Right.
Okay. So in terms of understanding the implications of what that section would enable law enforcement to do. Law enforcement, for example, could compel a bank without a warrant to reveal whether an individual is a client of a bank, how long they've been a client for, where they have accessed banking services, and provide the name of any person who has provided services to that individual. Is that fair?
I don't have the section in front of me, but that sounds right.
And it would provide warrantless access to subscriber data, including IP addresses.
Again,
right?
Sounds right.
That sounds right. And so it would seem to me that completely eviscerates the standard set out in Spencer and in Bajkowicz, right?
Well, it modifies it. Parliament can do that. The question is it necessary and appropriate? And so when we look at this, we ask questions about why is it suspicion and not belief? Is it rigorous enough? Is there enough reporting? These types of questions.
Yeah. But it raises serious privacy implications, does it not?
It has privacy implications. You're making it easier to obtain the data.
And do you have any concerns about that?
Well, again, I'm giving in advance the testimony that I'm going to be given to the committee when called on that specific bill. But certainly, once what we've seen so far is we would have preference in it being reasonable belief as opposed to reasonable suspicion in some of those aspects because of the sensitivity of information. And so there are areas where the standard, in my view, should be higher.
Well, what is going on here? We have a 10-year-old government that is neck deep in corruption, and it's another week, another Auditor General's report denouncing the actions of this government. A government that really wants to profess to be new. You know, they're a new government, not new people. It's the same people, but they've changed. They've found religion. You know, they're going to do things differently from now on. This same group of people.
And yes, of sacrifice. These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
Mr. Speaker, as this motion will demonstrate, they have an opportunity to demonstrate the genuineness of their conversion. We have made it easy for them today. We put forward a motion that they can vote for, which will show that they are, in fact, different from the way they were before. This is their opportunity. How helpful we are as a Conservative opposition. We are giving them an opportunity to demonstrate the sincerity of their apparent conversion by voting in favor of this motion.
Questions and comments. The Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard a number of people on the other side today talk about the same old government. That's not, in fact, the case. This government was judged in the court of public opinion. We got more seats. I would say it's the same old opposition, Mr. Speaker.
100%.
They lost their leader. as a choice of the Canadian public. What are you doing different to earn the confidence of the general public of this country?
Through the chair.
Well, I am here, and I will let the member for Brantford Brant South Six Nations explain what he is doing.
Yeah. Unlike the member from the same old Liberal government, he may be a new face, but he's inherited a corrupt, rotten, at its core, government with the same values and same beliefs. What I'm doing differently is, unlike this member, I stand up for my constituents, and I ensure they get value for their tax dollars.
Who voted for that? You're not even fooling the Liberal voters.
Mr. Speaker, a little bit of background for those who are just joining us. Today we are debating a motion from the Conservative Party, the Conservative opposition, that calls on the government to demand the return of money that was improperly taken by GC Strategies.
I'm standing just outside of the House of Commons where moments ago the Liberals gave taxpayers the middle finger yet again. This time the Liberals opposed our Conservative opposition motion calling on the Liberals to get taxpayers their money back from GC Strategies and to permanently blacklist these fraudsters from government contracts. This, after all, is the two-person basement firm that robbed taxpayers of $20 million in a Rive scam to do no work for an app that didn't work. And it gets worse, because last week the Auditor General revealed that the Liberals handed GC Strategies more than $64 million taxpayer dollars in contracts across 30 different departments. And of the contracts the Auditor General examined, she found no proof of work nearly half of the time. The bottom line is that GC Strategies was on the take for tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, and the Liberals let it happen. And today what we saw is a government that is absolutely shameless, that has no respect for the taxpayer. The good news is that the Liberals are a minority government, and they didn't have the votes. Our Conservative motion passed. So going forward, Conservatives are going to demand that the Liberals finally respect the will of Parliament and respect what is now an order of the House of Commons, and immediately commence proceedings against GC Strategies to make taxpayers whole and to ban GC Strategies from all government contracts forever. We're going to stand up for taxpayers, and we're not going to let the Liberals off the hook.
Hypothetical, but ridiculous hypotheticals are required to demonstrate what has actually gone on in government procurement. So you hire me for $100 to paint the fence. I hire someone else for $50 to paint the fence. I collect $50 for doing, you guessed it, nothing. Nothing. And if this happens over and over again to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, you get kind of a sense of the procurement system that has been operating under this government. You have, we're talking about GC Strategies today, but it's important for you and for people at home to understand that there are hundreds of companies that do staff augmentation work in the IT space alone. So you have these two guys working out of the basement that they've got a great business model, right? They get contracts, they hire someone else to do the work, and they collect a massive fee in the middle. But it's not only Christian Firth and Darren Anthony that are doing this work at GC Strategies, this work, right? This work. There are hundreds of companies doing staff augmentation for the federal government in IT alone. This is a profoundly broken system. And what it comes from is, so first the government makes procurement so complicated, so unwieldy, that almost nobody can understand it. And then you have people who position themselves as experts in nothing except getting contracts. In other words, they're people who understand how to they have the relationships, they have the access, they know how to host the right whiskey tastings for the right people, right? That's a real thing that happened. They know how to host the right whiskey tastings, and so they know how to get government contracts. And then once they get the government contracts, then they go on LinkedIn and find, okay, who are people that actually know how to do this work, and then they hire them. Mr. Speaker, it's like something out of Yes Minister that was rejected for being too unrealistic, right? But this is what actually happens and has happened for the last 10 years under this Liberal government. But now they've changed. Now they've changed. They'll never do it again, Mr. Speaker. They have a new government with the same people who have nonetheless seen the errors of their ways, Mr. Speaker. And you know, when all else fails in this debate, members across the way say, well, didn't we win an election? We won an election after all, Mr. Speaker. Nobody's disputing the results of the election, but I do think it's notable that in order to win the last election, these Liberals had to pretend to be something very different from what they had been for the last 10 years. Their only argument in the election was to say, well, Canadians want change and we've changed too. We'll be nothing like ourselves, right? They promised to be nothing like themselves. And that was that turned out to be a reasonably successful political strategy. But I think very soon Canadians will discover that they're actually not nothing like themselves. They're actually more like themselves than they pretended to be. And that we will see the continuation of these same absurdist procurement policies, things that if presented as the possible script for a television show, they would be rejected for being unrealistic. The fact that you have people getting hired to hire other people, a procurement system that is so broken and so complicated that only well-connected insider brokers can understand it. Those well-connected insider brokers receive the contracts, hire the people, and collect a massive premium for doing so. And this week, the Auditor General came out with a report, having looked in detail into what happened with this one particularly notorious company, GC Strategies, found that there was massive abuse. And just to share one highlight from committee exchanges we've had with GC Strategies, right? They admitted to presenting fraudulent resumes to the Government of Canada in order to get work. So.
Hey gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. So this one hits close to home for me. This is the MAID program, the medical assistance in dying. It's nuts. They're trying to include mental health as a reason that people can have assistance in dying. I'll tell you this something, man, when I was a kid, I got hurt really bad. I was in a coma for a couple of weeks. I'm a victim of violent crime and just a random act of violence. And I had 2 subdural hematomas. I got struck in the front of the face and I fell like a tree and hit the back of my head. So my brain was bleeding for a week. And when I got out of the hospital, or when I woke up, I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't tie my shoes. I didn't know who my parents were. I didn't know anything. It was crazy. Slowly things come back, like over years things come back. I still have memories sometimes, like something will trigger a memory. Anyhow, I would have been out of here like in my early 30s. I had given up, man. Everybody looks at you. Anyways, it was just rough. You get over these things sometimes, though. You can recover. But they would have signed me up for this program and sent me off. Anyhow, Michael Cooper, MP from Alberta, cowboy, giddy up. He's going to be giving his arguments on why this is ridiculous. Michael Cooper's a great speaker. Let's listen to this one. You can tell it hits him close to home too. Let's check this out. Michael Cooper, giddy up, cowboy.
Continuing debate, the honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on Bill C-39, legislation that imposes a new arbitrary deadline of March of 2024 in place of this Liberal government's arbitrary deadline of March 2023, whereby persons with a sole underlying mental health disorder will be eligible for MAID. I support Bill C-39 only because it is better than the alternative, namely that MAID would be available to persons with a sole underlying mental disorder in 1 short month from now on March 17th, which would be an absolute disaster and which with certainty would result in vulnerable persons prematurely ending their lives who could have otherwise gone on to recover and lead a healthy and happy life. Rather than imposing a new arbitrary deadline that is not grounded on the basis of science and evidence, what this Liberal government should be doing is abandoning altogether this radical, reckless, and dangerous expansion of MAID. And it is why I wholeheartedly support Bill C-314, introduced last Friday by my friend and colleague, the member for Abbotsford, which will do exactly that. Mr. Speaker, one would expect that a responsible government, before deciding to expand MAID in cases of mental illness, would take the time to study the issue thoroughly and to consult widely with experts. After all, we're talking about life and death. We're talking about a significant expansion that would impact a group of Canadians that are vulnerable. But, Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is not responsible, because that is not what happened, and it is why this government finds itself in the mess that it is in today with this rushed 11th hour legislation to delay this expansion. Instead, what the Minister of Justice did was accepted a radical Senate amendment to Bill C-7, which established an arbitrary sunset clause setting in motion this expansion of MAID in cases of mental illness effective March of 2023. To provide some the mismanagement and incompetence of this government. So, Mr. Speaker, let me say, when it comes to fire prevention and preparedness, this government has a lot of work to do.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Speaker, the wildfire situation across Canada, particularly in Western Canada, is dangerous. It's very, very serious. We have seen more than 1.5 million hectares burn. We have seen tens of thousands of people evacuated. Homes and property have been damaged and destroyed. Entire
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney.
are at risk. The intensity of the fires is so strong that the smoke can be felt and impacted in places as far away as the United Kingdom and Florida. I want to join colleagues in expressing my sympathy and concern for the thousands upon thousands of Canadians who are impacted by these wildfires. And I would also like to extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to all of the firefighters, first responders, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, law enforcement, volunteers, and members of communities who are stepping up, working tirelessly
we've got
in
Mark
often
Carney and his
very
merry
difficult
band of
and
minions
dangerous
taking over
environments
playing dress up
to save
we've
lives.
Got MP Michael Cooper, cowboy from Alberta, exposing carbon tax Carney, and we've also got Minister Melanie Joly zipping through things in Quebec with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Let's take a look and listen to things that are going on in Canadian federal politics. In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups: the globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories. So to start off, we've got Mark Carney and his merry band of minions. He's got Chris Biddle, who's a disaster, Anita Anand, Karina Gould, Andrew Vandenkolven. All the losers, seem to have come out to back up Carney as he tries to be charming to Canadians. I don't think it's going to work. Let's take a look.
There we go. So this is a dream. I get to speak to you, and you all have earplugs in, and you can't hear me. It's a dream for you, not for me. Listen, I came here. I wanted to come here today. Mark Carney, by the way. I wanted to come here today because this is such an exceptional company, and it's an exceptional company because of you, because of the workers and the relationship that Dofasco and ArcelorMittal has always had with its workers. I first came to this site, obviously not to this line, because this represents hundreds of millions of dollars of investment and ingenuity. But I first came to this site 30 years ago, when Dofasco was also the leader at that time, and the workers were the leaders. And you know, today is a difficult day for Canada. It's a difficult day for the industry because of these unjustified tariffs that have been put on. We and my colleagues in the government want to make absolutely clear that we stand foursquare with you in this, and we are doing several things. First, about the same time as we're having this conversation, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs are announcing that we will put in place reciprocal tariffs on U.S. steel, on U.S. aluminum, and on a series of other U.S. goods, so the total amount of our tariffs match the American tariffs. Now, we don't want to do this because we believe in open borders and free and fair trade, but we're doing this in response. The second thing is that we are going to make sure that all the proceeds from our tariffs go back to support workers in the affected industries, so in the steel industry, in the aluminum industry, and any other industry that the Americans may affect. In addition, we will double down on the partnerships that we have with the industry. As you know, a lot of the big investments here have been in partnership with the federal government, with the Ontario government, the so-called SIF fund as one example. We are proud of what you have accomplished. It's a remarkably competitive company. It's a world leader who's going to be here for another 30 years, another 30 years after that, another 30 years after that. And I know there's multi-generations of workers here. And your children and your children's children will have opportunities to work at Dofasco and ArcelorMittal. Let me just say one other point, or make a couple other points with respect to the United States and the relationship there. We understand, I respect President Trump's concern for American workers and American families. We respect his concern about fentanyl. It's an issue for us here in Canada as well, and that's why the Canadian government moved very quickly with a comprehensive response that has had a huge impact in terms of controlling that issue and getting on top of that issue much better. We are ready to sit down with the Americans, with the U.S. government. I'm ready to sit down with President Trump at the appropriate time under a position where there's respect for Canadian sovereignty, and we're working for a common approach, a much more comprehensive approach for trade. We're all going to be better off. Workers here in Canada, which is our concern, workers in America, which is his concern. We are all going to be better off when the greatest economic and security partnership in the world is renewed, relaunched. That's possible. You have a new government, but the same commitment, and that commitment is built rock solid on the commitment you have all made here at Dofasco.
Up next, we have Michael Cooper, an MP from Alberta, one of our favorites. He's a cowboy, in my opinion. Doesn't look or sound like a cowboy, but he does rope in Mark Carney and exposes the carbon tax carnage that will be coming. Let's take a look at that, too.
Mark Carney's values are for sale. Carney is best known as Carbon Tax Carney, and for good reason, because for years, Carney has been arguably the loudest global cheerleader for the carbon tax.
On the carbon price, we're demonstrating leadership. For example, here in Canada, the carbon price path, price of pollution, I don't know the polite way to say it, but the carbon price path out to $170 by 2030 is exactly the right policy. It is as important that the government has set out this path for the carbon price out to $170 by 2030 with the rebates for Canadians.
For Carney, the carbon tax is more than a policy. It goes to the core of who he claims to be. So much so that Carney prominently featured the carbon tax in his book entitled Values, Mark Carney's Values. In Values, Carney wrote that the carbon tax is one of the most important policies of our lifetime. According to Carney, Trudeau's carbon tax is a model for the rest of the world. But now that Carney is running to be Prime Minister, he's suddenly flip-flopped on his beloved carbon tax, telling Canadians that he would cancel Trudeau's carbon tax. This demonstrates that Carney's values are negotiable. They're for sale. So much for Carney's values. He's someone who clearly cannot be trusted. Carney will say and do anything to get elected. And consistent with this, while Carney is telling Canadians that he would cancel the carbon tax, he's telling radical Liberal Party carbon tax zealots that he would replace Trudeau's carbon tax with a new tax, an even bigger tax on key Canadian producers, costs that will be passed on to Canadian consumers. Carney can call this new tax whatever he wants, but what it really is a carbon tax, an even bigger carbon tax. Carney's claim that he would cancel Trudeau's carbon tax is nothing more than a cheap political gimmick in an effort to trick Canadians before the next election. But make no mistake about it, if Carney is elected, he would impose an even bigger carbon tax than Trudeau when he no longer needs your vote, but still needs your money. Only a common-sense conservative government led by Pierre Poilievre will axe the carbon tax on everything, for everyone, for good.
Last thing for this video, we've got Minister of Foreign Affairs Melanie Joly zipping through things, meeting with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for the United States, trying to discuss these tariffs. Anyways, Melanie Joly, time's up. We need an election. Let's take a look.
Okay, good. So, welcome everyone. Bienvenue au Québec, au Canada, à Charlevoix. It's really a pleasure to see all of you, to host you here. I'm grateful to be hosting you here on traditional territory of the Innu, and at the same time next to the beautiful St. Lawrence River, which is so core to Canada's history and of course to our shared prosperity. Donc je tiens aussi à remercier les gens de la Malbaie ici de la région de Charlevoix pour leur accueil chaleureux, parce que ça me fait plaisir de ultimement être capable d'inviter chaleureusement ici les ministres des Affaires étrangères du G7 chez moi. So Canada's proud to hold the G7 presidency this year. As we mark the 50 years of G7 cooperation, I cannot find a better time for us to host this important meeting. There's a saying here in Quebec, on a du pain sur la planche, so we have a lot to do together, and it's true, we have a lot of bread on our plate, and to be working together on common challenges. So I think that here as G7 Foreign Minister, we must meet the moment, and it is up to us to do that task. And we should not be daunted by the task. I think we should be working together to meet this moment. In recent years, we've shown it in many ways, maybe to curb the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe also for a strong response to defend Ukrainian sovereignty, or again to counter foreign interference. We've worked together also to champion human rights, democracy, and the protection of vulnerable communities from violence and persecution around the world. So, of course, peace and stability is on the top of our agenda, and I look forward to discussing how we can continue to support Ukraine in the face of Russia's illegal aggression, and we will want to see just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Of course, we want to foster long-term stability as well in the Middle East in the interest of all the people in the region, and we want to build resilience and stability in the Indo-Pacific, in Haiti, and in Venezuela. We also want to make sure that we bring back peace and stability in Sudan and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Alors nous allons parler de l'Ukraine, du Moyen-Orient, de l'Indo-Pacifique, de l'Afrique, d'Haïti, du Venezuela. And of course, my goal for our meeting is to advance collective thinking and collective solutions, and want to make sure that we can address some of the challenges that are linked to the maritime dimension, including what we're seeing to restrict freedom of navigation, growing the use of growing shadow fleets, dark vessels, sabotage of critical undersea infrastructure, illegal fishing, and the loss of maritime biodiversity.
Politics. Mark Carney will never put Canada first. Need proof? Carney wants to be the Prime Minister of Canada, but yet as recently as 2 years ago on the international stage, declared himself to be something other than Canadian. In a room full of globalists at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Carney declared himself to be a European.
In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups. The globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
You look like you were about to.
Yeah, it was a tell.
As a European, you know, as a
European, I am a
European,
actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, Irish citizen. Yeah. So there you
go.
Welcome. Speaking as a European.
A European? Let that sink in for a moment. Carney wants to be the Prime Minister of Canada, the leader of our great country, yet 2 short years ago identified as a European. Is that something that a proud Canadian would say? Are those the words of a leader who will put Canada first? I don't think so. Need more proof? During the current Liberal leadership race, Carney all but admitted that he will not put Canada first when he proudly called himself a globalist and an elitist.
People will charge me as being elitist or a globalist, to use that term, which is, well, that's exactly, it happens to be exactly what we need.
Really? A globalist and an elitist who thinks he's better than you? Is that what Canada needs at this time? Well, that's exactly what we've had over the past 9 years under the disastrous leadership of Justin Trudeau. Just like Carney, Trudeau likes to hang out in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Similar to Carney, Trudeau has declared Canada to be a post-national state with no core identity, and instead of putting Canada first, Trudeau has done the opposite. He's undermined our security and our economy by attacking our vital energy sector. He's pitted Canadian against Canadian. He has declared war on freedom of speech and civil liberties. And he's dishonored our proud heritage by promoting cancel culture, disavowing great leaders like our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, and removing some of our proudest national symbols from the Canadian passport.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
That's what you get with a globalist and an elitist like Justin Trudeau. He hasn't put Canada first, and neither will Mark Carney, because Mark Carney is really Justin Trudeau 2.0. The same Mark Carney who, by the way, has been an advisor to Justin Trudeau for years.
I have been talking with Mark Carney for years now.
It's an honor to accept this role as chair of this new task force on economic growth for the Prime Minister, for the leader.
In this challenging time, the last thing Canada needs is a self-described European globalist elitist. Canada needs a common-sense Prime Minister, someone who will always put Canada first, and that leader is Pierre Poilievre.
Our country is worth fighting for our people, for our land, for our home, for Canada first, always and forever. Let's bring it home.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. This one is incredible. Michael Cooper, MP from Alberta, he slams Iqra Khalid. There's no insinuations in this video. Just Michael Cooper calling out these filthy, woke tactics being used by the Liberals in committee. It is so much fun to watch. He slams her, man. It is hysterical. And, well, it's sad that this stuff is going on. But Michael Cooper is bringing the energy in this one. Check this video out, man. Watch the whole thing. It's a short for my channel, but we'll do a longer video on this one. It's a great piece. Michael Cooper is a man on fire. You can tell he's pissed. Check this out. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Khalid, you have the floor. Then I see Mr. Cooper.
Thanks, Chair. And I just wanted to reiterate, because I don't think that my questions were answered. And perhaps if you can take note, I would really appreciate if we can find out how many meetings are there left with the amount of witnesses that are left. And if we add these witnesses as presented in this motion and the amendment, how many meetings does this add to what we currently have? And when are we going to finalize this study?
That before I hear Mr. Cooper. So I was, there are 13 witnesses remaining. 2 of them are ministers, which really brings us down to 11. We have any ability to invite. 2 have already been invited and scheduled for after the recess, which leaves us with 9, most of which are former board members, of which I've been bundling in groups of 2 or 3. So I would say what I would call a handful of meetings remain to get through the current witnesses, and then there are 2 from the 4 being proposed today, looking at both the amendment and the sub-amendment. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And let me say that when it comes to the number of meetings that are required, dealing with $400 million that improperly went out the door in terms of non-compliance with the contribution agreements, in terms of multiple conflicts, I say we ought to have as many meetings as it takes to get to the bottom of what happened at SDTC. And I know that the Liberals opposite would love nothing more than...
Point of order, Chair. I don't think that that the member opposite should be making any insinuations about what we do and do not care about. We have been just as active participants in these meetings and continue to be. I would like to just have a little bit more collaboration in how we're going to proceed forward. And I don't think that my questions have been unreasonable in any way.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. Your point is taken. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor again.
Mr. Chair, we've seen time and again the Liberals run interference, interject with points of order that are not legitimate points of order, that are points of debate, including when Navdeep Bains, former Liberal Minister Bains, came before this committee. Time and time again, Ms. Khalid and Mr. Drouin intervened, obstructed, tried to block members of the opposition from posing questions about what Mr. Bains, former Liberal Minister Bains, knew and when he knew it, or what he didn't know or chose to ignore, because the Auditor General's report about what happened at SDTC was damning about what happened under former Liberal Minister Bains's watch. And we saw the outrageous display on his part when, with the assistance of Ms. Khalid and Mr. Drouin, when he refused to answer the most basic of questions the first time that he appeared before this committee. Well, another point of debate from Mr. Drouin.
No, I do. I love the sanctimonious from the opposite colleague. Can we just get back to the business of the committee? That'd be helpful. That's not
very
advancing
much
anything
within the business of this committee and the very motion before
Let's talk about how many more meetings do we want, and let's just get back to business, and then you can leave your Facebook clip somewhere else.
Why don't we let Mr. Cooper finish up, and then I'll
Mr. Say or
I
the floor is yours.
More to say.
The floor is yours. I'm not trying to cut you off. I just
once again being interrupted.
Order.
But we saw, with the assistance of Mr. Drouin and Ms. Khalid, them running interference to protect the minister from answering questions. The first time that he appeared before this committee, he did not answer really any questions that were put to him. So blatant and so consistent was his obstruction throughout that hearing that we had a very long debate in which former Liberal Minister Baines came this close to being found in contempt by this committee. And now, in the end, after the Liberals filibustered for hours and hours and hours, taking us till I think 9 or 9:30 to protect former Liberal Minister Baines, we agreed to allow him an opportunity to come back. He came back. He continued, in many instances, not to answer questions. In other instances, he gave testimony that contradicted what this committee had heard from other witnesses.
Mr. Cooper, I'm just going to interject. I said I would suspend for QP. It's 2 o'clock, so I'm going to suspend this meeting.
Oh my goodness, like I didn't want that video to end. Michael Cooper, can't wait to see you next time in committee. Like, we cover a lot of committee videos here. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. Michael Cooper, MP from Alberta, is one of our favorites to watch on here. He's exposing how Bill Blair has covered up for Trudeau and the rest of this Liberal caucus. And here we have, you'll wait until you see Daryl Sampson. He's a lunatic. Let's take a look. Michael Cooper's great to watch. Daryl Sampson's entertaining, but he's a goof. Let's take a peek.
Madam Speaker, for 54 days, the then Minister of Public Safety and current Minister of National Defence slow-walked a CSIS warrant. The subject of the warrant was none other than a former Ontario Liberal Cabinet Minister and top organizer and fundraiser for the Prime Minister in the GTA. This same former Liberal Cabinet Minister is also been someone long suspected of being involved in Beijing's interference activities on Canadian soil. At the public inquiry, national security officials testified that warrants of this kind are typically signed off by the minister between 4 and 10 days. Consistent with that, during the same time of this warrant, the minister signed off on 2 other warrants within 4 to 8 days. But when it came to a warrant involving a former Liberal Cabinet Minister and top organizer and fundraiser for the Prime Minister, it took 54 long days. Now, we know, based upon the evidence at the inquiry, that this was no accident. It's not as though the warrant application fell through the cracks on the minister's desk, which in and of itself would raise serious questions about the minister's competence. What happened was much more serious. There was a concerted effort within this government to slow walk the warrant into a Liberal kingpin. Here are the facts. The minister's chief of staff was given notice by CSIS that they intended to bring forward the warrant application in respect of the former Ontario Liberal minister. 2 weeks after the warrant sat on the minister's desk, CSIS followed up with the minister's chief of staff. The warrant continued to languish on the minister's desk for 30 more days. Indeed, it was not until the director of CSIS personally intervened did the minister finally sign off on the warrant. The question is why? What took so long? When I raised this question in the House during question period, I received a non-answer from the minister. The minister and his chief of staff testified at the public inquiry. At the inquiry, they provided no credible explanation for the delay. Canadians deserve answers about why it took 54 days in which national security may have been compromised. So I put it to the government, what is the explanation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Rural Economic Development and the Minister responsible for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency.
Thank you, Madam.
All right, guys, Daryl Sampson, get ready for a lot of energy and a lot of BS. All these liberals do the same thing, use woke tactics, go on the attack when they should be defending themselves. It's terrible strategy. Canadians are seeing right through it. Let's take a peek.
Speaker, it's a pleasure for me to rise today and to speak about the important issue of combating foreign interference in our democratic institutions. It's a little ironic for my colleague to talk about political interests in matters of national security when his leader still will not take his security clearance to learn more about foreign interference taking place in his party. Madam Speaker, since coming to office, our government has taken a range of measures to address the threats of foreign interference, such as amending the Canada Election Act in 2018, creating both the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency as well as the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, standing up to a range of initiatives to strengthen our electoral system against cyber and other threats through the plan to protect Canada's democracy in advance of the 2019 election, and building upon and further strengthening that plan to advance, of course, in the advance of the 2021 election. Ensure that key protections against foreign interference are not limited to the election period, banning intentionally false and misleading statements about election activities or the voting process to disrupt an election or its results, prohibiting contributions through money orders, prepaid gift cards, or crypto assets whose source can be difficult to trace. Introduce new third-party contribution rules to increase transparency and mitigate the so-called dark or foreign funds from entering the system. Madam Speaker, if passed, these amendments would continue the cycle of continuous improvements to Canada's electoral process. The members will have a chance to study, of course, the amendments proposed in C-65, and we look forward to the discussion that will follow. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable for St. Albert Edmonton.
The parliamentary secretary acts as if the Liberals are bystanders, and yet we're talking about a specific warrant that sat on the minister's desk for 54 days, despite repeated attempts by CSIS to have the minister sign off on the warrant. And I simply asked for an explanation. Why did it happen? Isn't the reason it happened was because it was about protecting a Liberal kingpin? It was about protecting someone who the Prime Minister saw as benefiting himself as being a Liberal organizer and fundraiser for the Prime Minister? Isn't it the case that once again this government put the partisan interests of the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister ahead of national security?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the government is committed to protecting and strengthening Canada's democracy. We look forward to the ongoing work of the public inquiry into foreign interference and the federal election process and democratic institution, including the Commissioner's final report in December 2024. The government will review the report in due course, of course. In the meantime, Madam Speaker, the government continues to take steps to counter foreign interference. This includes proposed amendments to the Election Act recently introduced through Bill C-65. Madam Speaker, I look forward to the ongoing engagement with the member of this House as we consider potential changes to further protect and strengthen our Canadian democracy. And I want to take the opportunity, of course, to wish my colleague and everybody in the House happy holidays, and we'll see you, of course, in the New Year's.
All right, gang, what do you think? Should Pierre Poilievre get his security?
If you have nothing to hide, why did you materially leave out that relevant fact? If you're not Burundi involved in the shakedown?
I stepped away from cabinet to deal with these issues, and I have met with lawyers, and we are working on legal action against Mr. Anderson right now. So let's put that on the record. The ethics commissioner, not once but twice,
I asked you, Mr. Boissonnault, why it is you materially omitted that fact, and I would put it to you. I'm going to ask you another question, but as Mr. Carr runs interference to protect you because you're a liar.
Whoa, Mr. Chair, there are.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. Randy Boissonnault, former minister Randy Boissonnault, disgraced minister, liar, Indigenous Randy, queer Randy, the other Randy. Why don't the Liberals have any interest in finding out who the other Randy is? It would seem in this committee meeting, all they want to do is get in the way, block the Conservatives' questions, which are very relevant. Anyhow, this is a wild committee, guys. Like, Ben Carr and Francis Drouin from the Liberal Party are ridiculous in this committee meeting. Absolutely atrocious. Michael Barrett and Michael Cooper hammer Randy Boissonnault, and Randy Boissonnault has no self-respect, guys. He's a total joke. Let's take a look. This is a wild committee meeting, like for real. It's out of hand. It's long, but check it out. It's entertaining. Let's take a peek.
On the table, and we begin the first round of questioning for 6 minutes. We have Michael Barrett.
Mr. Boissonnault, I'll give you an opportunity to come clean with Canadians. Who's the other Randy?
Mr. Chair, could you have the member please clarify his question?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward question. In your previous appearance at other committees in this scandal, you said that it was an other Randy. Who is the other Randy at your former company, Global Health Imports?
Mr. Barrett, I am not involved in any of the conversations. If you are referring to reports in the media, I am not involved in those conversations. And the ethics commissioner has indicated very clearly that I'm not involved in any of those conversations, any of those texts between Mr. Anderson and the person you just raised. And in fact, if you take a look at recent court cases, both the Gowie Group has indicated that they've never met me. I've never met them. And 4M Medical has indicated that they have never met me. I have never met them.
So the problem that we have is that you had previously said that you didn't have any contact with your business partner, Mr. Anderson, while you were serving in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. But then when you got caught, you admitted that you had, of course, sent text messages and that there was a phone call between you and your business partner exactly when he was corresponding with potential clients and fraud victims about Randy and Randy being in Vancouver, and that's where you were. The problem that we have is that in committee appearances, you've lied about owning 50% of the business. You lied about being in communication.
Mr. Chair.
You lied about there being another Randy.
That is not a fair characterization, Mr.
You
Chair.
lied about being Indigenous, and you lied about being a journalist. How can we believe anything that you say today?
Mr. Barrett, just 1 second, please. We have a point of order. Mr. Fresh, I don't know who raised it. It was...
Go ahead, Peter. Okay.
All together.
Yeah.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can you provide us with your reflections, please, on whether or not you believe it's within order to refer to a member in committee as a liar? Perhaps you can consult the clerk if you're unsure.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, too?
Hang on.
On that same point of order?
Mr. Duran?
Just, we also have the Conservative House Leader who refers himself as an American insurance broker, and we know that's a lie. Are we going to invite him to the committee? Just wondering, same standards.
Okay, well, Maybe we can change the language a bit and not refer to people as liars. And I'll give you your time back, Mr. Barrett.
How can we believe anything that you say when all of the things that I've listed that you said aren't true? When you said you were Indigenous, you said you were a journalist, you said you weren't in contact with your business partner, you said that the company wasn't getting any federal contracts. All of those things aren't true. You said one thing, and the exact opposite is true. Now, your Liberal colleagues want to put flowery language around that. If you say something that's not true, we all know what that is. Why should we believe you? How can we believe you today?
Well, Mr. Chair, through you, I would like to inform Mr. Barrett that he's simply mistaken and putting false claims on. We've litigated this at Ethics now twice, and the Ethics Commissioner himself has indicated that on the 6th, 7th, and 8th of September, I was not involved in the text messages that the National Post and that the Conservatives keep trying to raise. I'm simply not the person involved in those conversations. There was a text exchange between me and Mr. Anderson regarding a Purelator account that needed to be settled, and I was very clear about that at Ethics. There was no communication between us in the following days. Mr.
Seems
Barrett,
to change. Your story always seems to change once you no, sir. It's my time.
And
your story always seems.
And I was there on the 8th as well.
Okay, one person at a time, please. It's very difficult for the interpreters to figure out what's going on here. One person at a time, please. I believe Michael Barrett had a question, and then we'll have an answer. Mr. Barrett. Point of order from Mr. Frederick.
This has been happening regularly in this particular exchange, and I think that it's good at the outset just to clear it up. Let's give the witness enough time to offer a response back.
Point of order? What we've experienced in this committee is the person asking the question is due their time, and is in this case, Mr. Barrett is due his time to ask the person the questions he wants to ask. So. Just challenge the chair to keep that priority. Thank you.
Yeah, what my goal here is that the length of the question matches the length of the answer. Sorry, the length of the answer matches the length of the question. We'll try to keep that as close as possible, and that way it doesn't mess up the interpreters too much, and everyone has their time. So, Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Equal time. You said you were a journalist. Are you?
Mr. Barrett, I was a regular reporter for the Francophone news outlet, CBC Radio Canada.
Yep,
I was a member of the Canadian Media.
And that was equal time, and that's not what CBC has said. You said you were Indigenous to get federal contracts disenfranchising Indigenous peoples. Are you?
Mr. Chair, that is simply false. That's not true. I've never claimed Indigenous status, and I've never applied for an Indigenous contract. Full stop.
Well, we know that that's also not true, because the company that you own 50% of, Mr. Boissonneau, did exactly that. Your company, GHI, is under investigation for fraud and being investigated by the police. Is that correct?
I have not been contacted by any police service to that effect. And Mr. Barrett, I was not involved in any federal contracts while I was operating.
And so as much as you want to distance yourself from it, this is very much yours to own, because you in fact own 50% of it. So you were willing to cash the checks, but you're not willing to take any of the responsibility for where the money came from and how it came to be in possession of the company. Suspicious warehouse fires, fraud investigations.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah, I'm wondering, for the benefit of myself and other committee members, I would very much appreciate if the clerk could provide the timing of the length of questioning that you are allocating. It's 6 minutes per member. Every time that you stop the clock to deal with a point of order or to address something Mr. Barrett or Mr. Zimmer or others have said, I'd like it to be tracked for the committee that you're not providing more time to Mr. Barrett. So for our benefit, please, if you could have the clerk.
Are you questioning the the judgment of the chair?
I am asking for the chair through his
Are
clerk.
you questioning the integrity of the chair?
I am asking the chair through the
I have
clerk.
the timer right here, Mr. Chair, and I am keeping as close eye as I
So,
possibly can.
Mr. Clerk, I'm going to ask through you then, please,
Well,
sir.
no, Chair, that's not how this works, Mr.
Oh, okay.
Carnino.
Well, then, Mr. Chair, I'm asking.
We
and I
trust
don't
your
believe-
chairs at committee when it comes
Mr. Chair,
to that time.
Mr. Chair, I'm asking on a point of order.
I've answered your point of order.
Point of order, Chair.
I'm
This is
watching
clearly
that, Mr.
disruptive,
Yes.
intended to be disruptive.
Sorry, I
Let's get
wasn't
back
done
to
my-
work.
I
Let's
wasn't
get
done
back
my
to the work of this
I've
committee.
already ruled on that. Thank
Point
you.
of order.
If you wish to challenge the
There's
chair,
too many
go ahead.
people speaking. We
Ms.
need to
Sidley?
be respectful of the interpreters.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've ruled on that. If you wish to challenge the chair, there is a process
I will
for
challenge
that.
the chair.
Okay. We'll go
Running
to a vote.
interference for Randy.
Mr. Clerk? So the challenge, would you prefer a
Well, you
wording?
said you made a decision, Mr. Chair. If
I
you
made
haven't
a
made a
word-
decision, I have no
that-
challenge to make.
That the
If you
chair,
have made a
as-
decision,
the chair, as always, Mr. Carr, I know we got some time here. The chair in any committee has been responsible with the timing, whether
Correct.
it's Mr. Weiler or myself.
Correct.
All right? We've never had a problem with that. I don't
Correct.
anticipate there's being a problem now. But now you're calling into question my
I
integrity.
actually have not, Mr.
And
Chair.
so-
I've simply asked that
And I've
the
made
committee...
a ruling that I will keep track of the time. I have two people on either side of me that will watch. I have done nothing to impugn my integrity. The fact that
I
you're
haven't
still
suggested
questioning
that you have, Mr.
is,
Schmidt. I've simply
rather
asked for the
frustrating.
time to be made
So having
public.
said that, enough. We don't want to waste any more time. So if you wish to challenge the chair, we'll challenge and we'll have a quick vote. If not, we will move on with Mr. Barrett, who has the floor. So
So
what
just
would you choose
so
to
I
do?
can confirm here, you are not agreeing to allow for the committee to be aware of how much time is being allocated.
I
to
have
other
the
members?
timer right here. It's in full view of two other people.
Okay. So at any point, you're comfortable if we check in on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, you have 45 seconds. Floor is yours.
So, Mr. Boissonneau, while you were claiming to be Indigenous, the Liberal Party was also echoing that claim on their websites and posting that you were Indigenous, and the ethical problems that presents, of course, are self-evident. But I'd like to know from you, if you're aware, how much money the Liberal Party of Canada fundraised off of your false claim and their false claim that you were Indigenous when that was simply false.
So, Mr. Barrett, I sat at Indigenous Caucus as an ally between 2015 and 2019. And during the 2019 election, the party mistakenly included me on a list of Indigenous candidates. When I realized that I was on that list, I called the party, we contacted the party, and we had that mistake corrected. And I have never received, as a candidate in 2015, 2019, or 2021, any funding from the fund to support Indigenous candidates. And that is appropriate as it should be, because I do not claim Indigenous status.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Boissonneau. That completes that round of questioning. I believe continue on the second round of questioning, but now we go back to 5 minutes. Now to the Conservatives, Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Boissonneau, through you, Mr. Chair, have you commenced legal action against Mr. Anderson?
I've sought legal advice, Mr. Cooper, to look
So
at
the
all of
answer
my
to that
legal
is
options
no.
against
So
him.
let me get this straight. You claim that you are not the Randy in Anderson's text messages. The first report of this Randy being implicated in the $500,000 shakedown of the Gowie Group was all the way back 6 months ago on June 4th of this year. On July 17th, Anderson testified at the Ethics Committee that the only Randy at Global Health Imports was you. That day, you issued a statement in which you said you were, quote, deeply troubled by Anderson's testimony and suggested that he was using your name without your consent. That was 5 months ago. If you truly had no involvement in this shakedown and the operations of Global Health Imports, and Anderson was using your name, unbeknownst to you, you would have sued Mr. Anderson 5 months ago, I would put it to you. You still wouldn't, you've done nothing, is what you've said.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Cooper,
Mr. Drouin?
Just, I'm seeking your advice as to, is Mr. Cooper offering legal advice to Mr. Boissonneau, or is he just pontificating on something? Is he a lawyer?
I am a lawyer.
Thank you. I don't think that was a point of order. I think that was a question. I appreciate it. Mr. Boissonneau, the floor is yours.
Photographic memories?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, to Mr. Cooper's question, I have started the process to take legal action against Mr. Anderson now, and I'll be very clear. One of the reasons I stepped away from cabinet was to be able to
retaining
Mr.
counsel,
Mr. Chair,
besides
do I get
retaining
my time?
counsel, it's my time. I'm reclaiming
Chair?
my time. Besides retaining counsel, have you taken any legal steps whatsoever against Mr. Anderson in the past 5 or 6 months?
Mr. Chair, how many seconds do I have from Mr. Cooper's opening statement?
It's a very simple question. Just answer it.
Okay, hang on. Okay, as I said from the beginning, the time of the answer should be as close as possible.
All of us go to Florida. We don't necessarily
And
so all of us go to
giving a
Florida.
bit of leeway here, but I want to keep it as close as possible. So,
So, Mr. Schmale, to Mr. Cooper's first, I haven't been able to answer his first question because he interrupted me 3 times.
Okay, why
So
don't
can
we-
I answer his first question?
Well, he took the floor
I'm ready
back.
to
so
answer his first
I guess the time is yours. However, usually you just answer the question you just gave you.
So I'll answer the question. In the recent court case against Mr. Anderson, it is clear that Mr. Anderson has been using my name without consent. I'm not involved in
And my
those
question to
other
you was whether
conversations.
you had commenced a legal action and you have, through your non-answer, said that you
We
haven't.
are working
and so,
on-
so
we are working
Mr.
on the legal
Boissonneau,
action
it's
right
fine.
now,
I'm reclaiming
Mr.
my time,
Chair.
Mr.
Order,
Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, point
Just
of order.
again.
2 points of order. I don't know who was first, Mr. Drouin or Mr.
Running
Carr.
interference.
Well, and no, Mr. Cooper, it's you're running interference. I thought the rule was if there's editorializing on a particular issue, then the witness has the same amount of time to answer the question, but that's not.
There's the preamble and there's the question.
On the same point of order.
Hang on. I got
All right, gang, we're going to try to cross over into something different now. Let's go for Melanie Joly is a skank. She's disgusting. Let's take a peek at this.
All of us go to Florida. We don't necessarily
Oh, yeah. Let's go to Florida, baby.
register with the embassy. And so when you look at the number, it's just an indication, but that's clearly not the entire picture.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here. We're going to take a look at Melanie Joly, our Minister of Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Global Affairs, some kind of affairs.
I started noticing that something very different was happening at the CBC.
Who were we to deliberately withhold information the public needed to know and had a right to know in order to make a decision based on informed consent about their health?
They took an exceptional moment to decide that they would not be journalists, that they would instead be public health messengers. And the result is that Canada's national broadcaster has morphed into a state broadcaster. It's promoting government policy without question, while censoring, belittling, and shaming learned Canadians who dare to object and attempt to inform us of the truth.
Canadians were starting to see this and they were calling us out on it. All of a sudden, the term anti-vaxxer came up.
That's because this was not news gathering, it was propaganda.
And to define propaganda, it's information, ideas, opinions, or images that give one part of an argument, which are broadcast, published, in order to influence a person's opinion.
Bad journalism is incompetence, but propaganda is a betrayal.
We were clearly pushing propaganda.
And we expect them to tell us the truth because they've done it for 50 or 60 years.
And I was disturbed and alarmed about the language that was being used in some of our editorial meetings. The CBC was still demonizing the unvaccinated as a danger to public safety. CBC is not impartial. It is not independent. How could you ignore this?
And that's what CBC has done. It's betrayed us all.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. We've got our Minister of Industry, Melanie Joly, just zipping along. She's going to be here with David Cochrane. He is so annoying the way he holds a pen agitates me. Like, who holds a pen like this? Anyhow, let's get into this. Our fool Minister of Industry, Melanie Joly, with David Cochrane, the cockroach, the hack journalist from CBC, the propagandist. Let's see what they're going to sell us. It probably is not going to be anything great. Let's take a look.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is laying out his plan for Canada to be its own best customer. Today, the Prime Minister revealed more details on the Liberals' Buy Canadian policy as they try to use federal dollars to boost demand for tariff-strapped Canadian industries.
Whenever the federal government spends, we will select Canadian suppliers by default. And in those cases, when domestic suppliers aren't available, purchases will be required to include Canadian content or to be sourced from trusted partners. And those cases will be the exception, not the norm. And they will require ministerial approval.
To put the Canadian requirements in place, the Liberals are giving $98.2 million to the Federal Procurement Office over the next 5 years. They're also promising to leverage up to $70 billion in infrastructure spending to drive Canadian purchases and to apply the new policies in the Major Projects Office, Build Canada Homes, and the Defence Investment Agency. So, will this be a lifeline for industry or more regulation that slows down Canadian projects? Melanie Joly is the Minister of Industry, and she joins me now. Minister, welcome back to the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Help me understand some of the specifics of this. What would a Crown corporation or a government department have to do to prove it can't buy Canadian? Because the onus to buy Canadian seems pretty clear, but what would be a possible exception here?
So, well, there are some things that we don't manufacture, that we just don't produce in Canada. So that would be the exception to the rule, and then when that's the case, what we'll do is we'll make sure that there can be Canadian content in what is then manufactured abroad. I'll give you an example. Obviously, the best example right now is with the submarines and the 12 submarines that we want to buy. This is a huge procurement, the second biggest for our Defense Department for our Canadian Armed Forces. It's the second after the F-35s. And so, in that sense, what we're asking either from TKMS, which is a German company, a German-Norwegian consortium, or Onwa, which is a South Korean company, is to show that they can create jobs in Canada, that they can support through their supply chain Canadian companies. So that's the idea.
Okay, but what about where does price and delivery timelines fit into this? Because you could have an infrastructure project where maybe the Canadian option is simply way more expensive than an international option, or they can't deliver it at scale, at least in the early stages of this transition. Does that become a factor there, or is it even if it's more expensive and slower, you have to do it?
Well, I think it's a balance, because it's important that we look into obviously prices, but it's important also that we support our jobs at home. You know, David, what we're facing right now is protectionism all around the world. U.S. has an important America First procurement policy. Many countries also in Europe are working on that, EU as well. So we're trying to tread a needle, which is we have these companies that are affected by unjustified and unjustifiable tariffs in the steel, in aluminum, in the lumber sector, and we need to find a way to create a domestic market. We need to create jobs and at the same time protect jobs that we already have. So that's why we're coming up with a Buy Canadian policy, which is extremely important, which will help build our country even stronger.
So, I mean, I understand the motivation here and to offset the economic damage that's being done by all of this, but does it mean sort of the value for money principle that you kind of want to have in tender bids and in competitions to get the lowest cost possible, that you have to set that aside to some degree because of the need for economic activity and to use government spending to help spur economic activity in Canadian companies?
Well, your question is a good one, but you're presenting it as if it's either or. I think what I've heard from many, many Canadian companies is there's frustration with not being even able to have access to Canadian contracts, not even being able to bid. And that's a difference in culture that we're bringing up. today, that we will look at working with Canadian companies, that we can also help them when we give them a contract. Well, they can then invest and they can hire and they can have some predictability on how they can continue to build their own companies. And I've seen it many, many, many times. A lot of big companies have access to Canadian procurement because also they have an entire department that knows how to navigate the bureaucracy in Ottawa, which doesn't make sense. So what we're doing right now is we're saying we will buy Canadian first, and we will also help our companies to have access to Canadian procurement and also to cut red tape. It's just the right thing to do right now.
So Minister, how do you do this? Because, you know, it is an element of protectionism here to fight the larger global trend of protectionism and still comply with the free trade agreements that you've signed, not just with the U.S. I'm thinking of the European Union, for example, because CETA demands equal treatment in high-value contracts and in bidding for European companies when it comes to bidding on government procurement. So how do you do this without running afoul of your trade agreement with a good trading partner in Europe?
And we'll continue to have these conversations with Europe. See, I'll give you an example. Europe just came up with some very stringent norms regarding which type of steel can go into the European Union with very protectionist measures, because they're facing a real challenge to their steel industry. And they've imposed 25% tariffs also. And meanwhile, what we're trying to do right now is to make sure that we're keeping a relationship with Europe and that we can continue to have access to Europe. And we're in discussion also with the European Union to make sure that Canadian steel and aluminum can continue to go into Europe. And meanwhile, we will try to reciprocate. But we are all trying to thread the needle here because we're all reacting to US protectionism. And I had a conversation with the Minister of the Economy of Europe, which is my counterpart, Stéphane Séjourné, and we had that conversation. This is all new to all of us, but we also need to protect our own sectors in our own countries, because obviously if that's not the case, there will be too many jobs lost, and we don't accept that. And Canadians won't accept that. So when I presented the vision for Canadian industries, I said, the first thing we need to do is protect jobs. And while we're protecting jobs, we'll also work on creating jobs and attracting talent and investment. And when talking about protecting jobs, I said, short term, we need to protect our market. Middle term, we need to have our companies adapt and pivot to new markets and new products. And longer term, we need to have a stronger domestic market. And what you're seeing today is the fact that we are coming up with a new Buy Canadian policy, which will be put into place starting this month and completed by spring of 2026 to make sure that we buy Canadian lumber, Canadian steel, and Canadian aluminum, and that we support our companies that are struggling with tariffs.
But Minister, my understanding that as you try to thread this needle, to use your phrase, you've been talking to the Europeans. Do you see the potential for a collision here with the trade agreements? Because I appreciate everyone's adjusting, and these trade agreements were signed in a different age compared to today. But do you see the potential for collision? Because I know the budget talks about changing how certain Canadian trade tribunals work. It seems like you have to make legislative changes to immunize the government for this policy to work.
Well, you know, we're doing both at the same time. So we're coming up with this Buy Canadian policy is really, really important. And meanwhile, we're having conversation with new trading partners. And it's not either nor. We have to be able to do both. And I'm having a G7 industry ministers in December in Montreal. And we will have these conversations, particularly with Europe and particularly with Japan, because that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be able to protect our jobs and meanwhile build an economic bloc with countries that believe in free trade, that are able to trust each other, that can rely on free trade agreements. But right now, there are clearly questions as to how we can support these free trade agreements while a lot of governments are taking very much protectionist measures. And so the world is being reshaped. The Prime Minister has been saying there are lots of things we can't control and things we can control, and we will focus on what we can control. And this Buy Canadian policy is all about that.
Okay, it's easy for me to see how this would work with, say, Build Canada Homes or with infrastructure through the Department of Infrastructure. Yep. But the press release from the Prime Minister's office says the Buy Canadian policy will apply to the work of the Major Projects Office to fast-track transformative energy, trade, and transportation projects across the country. Does this mean the projects that get fast-tracked have to adhere to a Buy Canadian policy, even if it's a private sector proponent? How does that work?
So I had conversations already with key companies that will, for example, build an LNG pipeline. Well, of course, we want them to take Canadian steel. We want them to be able to buy Canadian steel because it will support Canadian workers. And that's good news for the sector. Now, a lot of these steel plants don't necessarily do the type of steel that the company needs for the pipeline. And so I'm working with the steel plants to put money on the table to retool them to make sure that they'll do the right type of steel. So that's the job I'm doing, along with the private sector and along also with a lot of the proponents from that have major projects. I'll give you another example. You've talked about major projects. I'll talk to you about our defense investments. We want to invest even more in aerospace, in military aerospace. Well, we know that that will have an impact on the aluminum sector or also on the steel sector. We cannot let go of these strengths. If Canada at one point was facing a major international conflict, we would need to defend ourselves, and we can only be able to defend ourselves if we have steel and aluminum produced in this country. And we cannot pretend that we can be a very strong economic power in the world if we don't have steel or aluminum. So that's why we're finding ways to protect these industries, and the Buy Canadian policy that you're asking me questions about is actually about that.
Okay, but just help me understand a little bit more specifically on the Major Projects Office. If you're designated a project of national interest, does that mean you have to adhere to this Buy Canadian policy? Because I can understand why the government might pay higher prices for domestic economic activity, but a private sector company with shareholders and a fiduciary responsibility, that's a tougher pill to swallow. So is it just in public infrastructure work that goes through that office, or is it everything that goes through that office?
The goal is to make sure in the end that they take they use Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, and Canadian lumber, for sure.
Okay.
That's been the goal.
Now, what if a company thinks it's too expensive, for example?
The goal is to make sure that they take our Canadian steel and Canadian aluminum. And these conversations have already started. Because companies understand that they need to do their own work, that they need to contribute, that we're building one strong country, and it's part of the deal of being able to be a major project is actually to spur economic benefits across the country. That's exactly why Prime Minister Carney came up with this idea of major projects and being able to fast track them, because we need to do that to create economic growth at a time where we're dealing with trade tensions and a complicated, to say the least, southern neighbor. So that's why, of course, it's part of the conversations, and and the conversations are not only happening between the government and the private sector. The proponents of these major projects, may they be mining or resources type of projects, they're also happening between the companies. So between steel plants or aluminum plants and lumber companies, and also the proponents. So that's also happening.
Okay, so just a final question, because I know I've gone over time. So I know you say it's a goal to get people to use steel and aluminum, but is it a requirement if it's a major project? Because a goal, is not as enforceable, obviously, as a requirement. So help me understand, which would it be at this point?
I understand your question, because right now the type of steel that is done in Canada, a lot of it was linked to the U.S. auto sector in the U.S., obviously south of the border. And so a lot of our plants are coming up with new projects to change the type of steel, to make sure that they can adapt. that needs investments. That's where I come in and my team and I come in to support these investments. That's why we have a strategic response fund of $5 billion to help that pivot, maybe at ArcelorMittal, Dofasco in Hamilton, Stelco, or also the Algoma Steel, so St. Marie plant. So we'll do that with them in order for them afterwards to be able to have.
All of us go to Florida. We don't necessarily
Oh yeah, let's go to Florida, baby.
register with the embassy. And so when you look at the number, it's just an indication, but that's clearly not the entire picture.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here. We're gonna take a look at Melanie Joly, our Minister of Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Global Affairs, some kind of affairs. She talks about being in Florida. When was the last time you were down there? Takes it for granted. I don't even know if it's like code language or something, but something has happened since she came back from France. I don't know what kind of a party it was in France. I do know a good party though, and it looks like that to me. You can see other cabinet members. I think that Joly maybe is sharing her stash. Everybody seemed strung out this week. Pretty crazy. Let's take a look at Melanie Joly. She was in the camera frame this week more than most other weeks. She avoids that stuff a lot. I'm not sure if something gave her more confidence or what it is, but she seems even dumber than usual. Let's take a look. Watch this.
Okay, good to see you. I'll start in English and then I'll go to French.
Oh yeah, let's go to Florida.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Each for the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the Bloc. We'll begin with Madame Dancho. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister Joly, for being with us today. Of course, we have a copy of the redacted contract of the Special Contribution Agreement of up to $15 billion taxpayer dollars and the Strategic Innovation Fund, which represents a $500 million contribution from your government. Of course, to Stellantis for the Nexstar EV battery plant, as you know, courtesy of CBC last week. So now we have a situation where 3,000 people have been laid off in the Brampton facility, as you know, and you've responded to say that you're going to sue them, that they've broken their promises. And just today, you've announced that you're starting the formal dispute resolution. So I'm trying to understand what exactly the promise is that you're saying they broke, assuming that means that they broke a promise they signed in the contract. So can you tell the committee where in this agreement, courtesy of CBC, is that Canada-wide jobs guarantee? What clause?
Well, first of all, when it comes to the different, so I think we should be clear, there are 3 different contracts. This committee will have access to it. The government is acting in good faith. I want to make sure that everybody is aware of these contracts and will be able to have access to it. So it's not a courtesy of CBC or not. The government has already accepted the production
but in
of
that,
the
that's
contract.
the first that I'm able to see it. So is it in that contract or is it in another CIF agreement?
So obviously you'll see in the contract that all the contracts are linked, and clearly it is about protecting jobs. It is about also the production at the Brampton facility. So you'll see that clearly.
So-
By the way, I must
Thank
say,
you.
Raquel, because I think your question is really an important one. This committee, although it's not necessarily the same members, but this committee got access to contracts for the Nexstar facility 2 years ago. So that's why the government has never,
Minister.
been clearer that you can obviously
Thank you,
have
Minister.
access to it.
Those are read in confidence. We do know they're going to OGO, and now CBC has released it. So this is the first access we've been able to publicly see the contract. And again, I'll just say as an aside, this is, of course, a professional setting, Minister, so I'm extending a professional courtesy to you to refer to as Minister Joly. I would appreciate that same courtesy to me in this setting. Thank you. So in this contract, though, there is no jobs guarantee other than the 2,500 at the Nexstar plant. So are you saying that the other CIF agreement that was for retooling Brampton and Windsor, does that contain a Brampton jobs guarantee?
So I must dispute what you just said. This is not a fact. There's always job numbers guarantees. That's exactly why the government of Canada and also the government of Ontario in this case have decided to support the company. Because at the end of the day, why do we do this? MP Dancho, we do that because we believe that it's important to create jobs, to protect jobs
Right.
and create
No, I
jobs.
agree, Minister,
So
and I
you will
know
have
that.
access to the information. You will
appreciate
see in
that.
the contract
So we
that there are
have
job
the-
numbers.
thank you. We
And
don't-
of course, there are things that are commercially sensitive, but the government will be acting in good faith.
But in the contract that we were provided from CBC publicly, there is a jobs commitment to the Nexstar plant. There is no mention of Brampton. So I'm asking you, in the contract we have not been able to see for Brampton, is there a jobs guarantee for Brampton?
There are jobs guarantees in all the different contracts, but I must say also that you absolutely need to make sure that you see not only the contract that is linked to the investment through the Strategic Innovation Fund for the Windsor and Brampton facility, but also its amendment. And we'll make sure that that's the case.
So you're saying that the Nexstar, the two contracts you've provided to them that total well over $15 billion, that you're tying that contract being paid out to the other SIF agreement for the Brampton and Windsor retooling. Is that correct? Because they're in violation of a Brampton.
The three contracts are linked. There's a
Right, they're
contract
linked
and an
through
amendment.
14.1G.
So,
yeah.
A couple of things. And maybe, Charles, if you want to be able to address the question by MP Dencho. But just before I pass it to Charles, it is really important to understand that in the contract, when you refer to $15 billion, the $15 billion was linked to the production and sale of batteries. So when you look at Windsor right now, and obviously your colleague would know because she's from the writing, the facility has been built, but the company is still hiring. And there's not been any production and sale of batteries yet. So the government has not spent $15 billion. So I know that some
Thank you.
colleagues have been using the
I
term
appreciate
$15 billion,
that.
but it's not
It's up
accurate.
to $15 billion, though.
But it's not been
And I think
spent
what
yet
you've
by the
painted in
government,
media is
and
that
that's an important
what
fact.
you're saying, though, is that because those 3,000 jobs at Brampton were laid off, they're in violation of their agreements. Fair enough. Now, you're saying that there is a Brampton jobs guarantee in that other SIF agreement that no one in the media or ourselves has seen. That's going to OGO. We welcome that opportunity to see that. But you're saying there's a jobs guarantee in there that will link it to the Nexstar battery plant. Is
It's
that correct?
actually linked to the fact that the Brampton facility must be operating, and there is not a possibility. If the Brampton facility ceases its production, there will be a violation of the contract.
And that's going to impact your agreements with the Nexstar plant. Is that correct?
And that's why we're actually starting today
With
the
the
mechanism of dispute settlement, because it is important that we be able
Understood.
to hold the company
So are
to
you
account.
prepared
But I
then-
just, MP Dencho, maybe Charles, you want to add something?
Sure. Thank you very much. I guess what I would just highlight in all the agreements under the Strategic Innovation Fund, there are regular commitments around jobs, around the maintenance of activity, and so those are
Thank
the
you.
types of economic
Just with my
activity.
remaining 10 seconds, so are you prepared to pull back some of this up to $15 billion and the other funding from Nexstar if they don't properly equip with the 3,000 workers in Brampton? Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you prepared to make that commitment? You're going to roll back some Nexstar funding?
Well, we'll make sure that basically we continue to uphold them to the funding that they're liable for, period.
I'm out of time.
Thank you, Madame Dancho. Madame O'Rourke, floor is yours.
Oh, yeah. Let's go to Florida, baby.
Presidential, you have 5 minutes.
An issue. Again, it's 3,000 jobs, as you've said, and you've linked the contract, the SIF retooling with Brampton and Windsor to the Nexstar plants. So I need to understand, though, you mentioned there was a production guarantee for the Brampton SIF agreement, but you did not specify an employment guarantee number. So was it 3,000 jobs that SIF agreement with Brampton guaranteed?
So I will provide that information through you because obviously they're commercially sensitive information. So I
If
just
I may
need
just
to check.
correct, if I may just interrupt
But
for a moment,
no,
if
I
just
don't want to
may,
be interrupted,
before,
Mr. Chair. I just
before
want to
you
be able
mention
to
that,
finish
if
my
I
sentence,
may.
please.
Minister,
So-
MP Dancho.
if I may.
Yeah, here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
When we ask the minister to appear, we want the minister to have an opportunity to have answers. We want members to have an opportunity to have questions. I'm not going to hold the time of her response against your time.
What about this time?
Okay, this time the clock is paused, so you're okay. Minister, I'll let you finish the response. Madame Dancho, I'll ask to let her complete, and then Minister, I'll ask you to let her complete. I'm not going to hold the clock
Yeah, that's it.
hostage here. So Minister, finish, and then MP
Yeah,
Dancho,
I
back
think
to
it's
you.
important when you look at the different contracts that first and foremost, particularly on the battery front, The contract is 1/3 the government of Ontario and 2/3 the government of Canada. So it's not $15 billion. I know that the MP has referred to $15 billion
Minister,
for the
I will have to
government
cut
of
you off
Canada.
because this isn't
It's
what I
actually
asked you
together.
specifically.
But to go specifically on the job numbers, we'll look at what is possible to make public because of commercially sensitive information.
If I may on that specific point,
I
please.
just want to
If I
finish
may
my
on that
answer.
specific point,
and
please, if you'll
therefore
allow me,
we will
Minister.
be
It is
able
my
to
time,
answer
so I'm
your
just going to have
question.
to respond. So on the commercially sensitive redactions, now on the SIF agreement for Nexstar, the jobs guarantee of 2,500 was not redacted, so it stands to reason that it wouldn't be redacted, wouldn't be commercially sensitive under a different SIF agreement. Surely you can tell us if there was a 3,000 person jobs guarantee for Brampton, and that's not commercially sensitive information. So it is concerning to me that you're not committing that there was a jobs guarantee for the Brampton
that's
facility.
not what I'm saying.
So you're saying that there is...
I'm saying that all the plants were linked and all the contracts are linked. So you will be able to see it when we will be producing.
But if there wasn't a jobs guarantee of 3,000 people at Brampton, which is the whole reason you're here, then how is it that you're tying all of the money to a jobs guarantee that may or may not exist? You should be able to tell us if there is a jobs guarantee for the 3,000 jobs in Brampton.
I think you're falling into the trap of trying to find a problem where there's none.
Well, the problem is that 3,000 people were laid off,
the government
and your
was trying
government committed
to do,
thousands, millions, and billions, in fact, of dollars.
Well, MP
and we're
Dancho,
trying
I
to
don't know whether
understand
you want
if
this to be a
there's-
monologue or you want me to appear. Because
the question
if you
I'm
want
asking
this
you
to
is
be a
very
monologue,
clear.
So, colleagues,
I don't need to be here.
Colleagues, I'm going to pause us again for a moment. I do want to ensure that we've got an opportunity for dialogue. I think that's the ultimate goal here. Minister, if you can give us maybe 30 seconds in your reply, MP Dancho will go back to you, and then I believe you were hoping to split the time with Mr. Seaback, of which there would be about 3 minutes or so left. Minister, if you want to give us about a 30-second answer here.
Yeah, well, ultimately the goal was to create jobs. And so obviously there were job numbers, and obviously it was linked to the fact that we needed to protect the Brampton facility. I was not negotiating at the time, but this is clear through the very evaluation and just the fact that just reading the contracts. When you see that there are contracts that are linked to investing in the Windsor plant that are linked to the Brampton facility, or investing in the Windsor Nexstar LG, basically Stellantis LG, contract linked to the Brampton facility. So clearly it was to protect the jobs. And so that was the position of the government.
If I may, so again, what we're trying to dig down is if your government instituted a clause in one of these three agreements that guaranteed the broader Stellantis footprint in Canada, including the 3,000 jobs that were just laid off. You know this. So what I'm trying to drill down is if there was something in the contracts, there isn't one in here. Brampton is even mentioned in the contract for the Nexstar agreement. I understand they can be linked. There is a clause 14.1G that may link it to the Brampton facility. But you're not committing whether there was a clear jobs guarantee there. So your argument is, oh, no, we're covered. We're suing them in clear grounds. But you're not telling us, in fact, if there was 3,000 jobs guaranteed in that SIF agreement. So that's the real question I have, because there is significant commitments, as you know, up to $15 billion in partnership with Ontario. We have also another $1 billion of capital investment as well for the retooling of Brampton and Windsor under the SIF agreement. I'm trying to nail down if there's a jobs requirement for Brampton. A further $500 million in this SIF agreement for the Nexstar. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars. And from our estimation and the historic investment that your government has made, surely there should be an explicit Canada-wide jobs guarantee. But we're splitting hairs here. You're kind of being quite evasive of the numbers, whether there's a real guarantee. It should be explicit if you're going to give a historic amount of taxpayer funding. In fact, just to wrap up, Mr. Chair, I will just say this. I'm not sure if you understand the magnitude of the money that you've committed, but I did some math. And the number of two-parent, full-time working households that had to work for your government to provide just its contribution to Stellantis is over 647,000 Canadian families had to work an entire year for your government to provide up to $11 billion. And there is no explicit jobs guarantee in anywhere here.
True.
So
you're putting words into my mouth, which I don't agree.
Of whether there's a
and also, you're not being true to the contract.
You're not
because the contract is until 2032. So math doesn't work. Stop doing politics. The goal right now is to protect the workers.
Enough.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to be generous here. Mr. Seaback, I'm going to give you the opportunity because I believe that MP Dancho was hoping to share some time with you. There is not time left. I'm going to be generous, provide you the opportunity for a question.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I ask that you allow the minister to respond in full to that question, and then we're going to continue. Okay?
Great. Minister, I know you're aware that Oshawa lost a shift, 700 jobs. They went to the United States for production there. Oshawa plant makes light-duty trucks and heavy-duty trucks. Are you aware that GM is now retooling an abandoned EV plant in Orion, Michigan to manufacture light-duty trucks starting Q1 2027? And I spoke to Unifor Auto Workers this morning about this. So they want to know from you, will you guarantee today that they will not lose their jobs and have those jobs be transferred to the United States, just like what happened at the Brampton Stellantis plant? Will you guarantee it today?
So, Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I think that this was about Stellantis. I will answer, of course, discussions linked to GM. When it comes to Oshawa, the third shift is here until January, and we're fighting for it. And we're having conversation with Stellantis to make sure that we're able to keep it and to keep the production in St. Catharines and to keep and bring back also a production to Ingersoll. And I will continue to push because I think that is completely unacceptable what is going at GM. That being said, I think that what is happening at GM and what is happening at Stellantis are two different decisions. Because there was a clear commitment on the part of Stellantis before the Canadian government to make sure that there would be a facility that would be working with the Jeep Compass at Stellantis in Brampton. When it comes to also the third shift, we'll continue to make sure that we put pressure on GM. I will be having conversation with Mayor Barra. Unifor has been having conversations also with GM, and we will be united because I've met also with the Oshawa people. I've met with the Oshawa Auto Workers. I've met also with Unifor, and I'll make sure that they can keep their jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Seaback.
Oh, yeah.
I personally find it very confusing how any liberal voter, like, I'm sure you're naive, like, it's okay.
Moon Highway, you and Christia chugging Crown and Coke again?
Sober since 2019. Worse than tequila nightmares. France voicemails me in Quebecois.
Comrades, seize the Timbits. Free poutine for all. Socialism fixes stuff.
Canadians have elected a minority government with a very thin margin, depending on which parties may side with the government or with one another on any given vote. I try not to bake feelings into these things. They're math challenges, not problems with feelings. But we have to make sure that we do the work necessary to try to collaborate with parties across the aisle in order to implement the mandate that Canadians have given us.
Oh, yeah.
Minister Sean Fraser is at it again.
Can you guarantee that if C9 passes, no Canadian will end up being charged because of something they've posted on Twitter or Facebook?
Well, if they commit the crime of willfully promoting hatred against another person.
A crime with a definition that you're changing.
So, but it's possible that they could be convicted for what they willfully promoting hate online today. So certainly I would hope if someone commits a crime in the real world or online that they would face the appropriate criminal penalty if in fact it's captured by the.
Everything about this is crazy. So Sean Fraser is the Minister of Justice. He is the former Minister of Immigration who broke Canada's immigration. He's the former Minister of Housing. Have you been able to buy a house lately? Yeah, that's what I thought. And now he's the Minister of Justice. We have hate speech laws in Canada. Yeah, we already have them. Like if you watch the rest of that exchange, Andrew Lawton, the Conservative Member of Parliament, goes on to tell about a man who was arrested for having a swastika. But you know what the real problem is in Canada? You get arrested, but you're let out on bail. This is crazy. This is crazy that this is the Minister of Justice's first priority when there is literally everyone begging for bail reform. And they have openly said, we've done a great job. We have reformed bail. Like they are they are liars and they are dangerous. Like, this is at the point where it's like, you have victims, you have mayors, you have premiers, you have police associations. Police cannot do their job because they go and arrest the criminal who does the swastika, or the guy who breaks into your home and murders you in front of your children, or breaks into your car. And guess what? They are out on bail. Or how about a guy that rapes a 3-year-old in her bed? Like, what is happening? Like, the Minister of Justice right now should be on the top of mountains being like, guys, we are going to fix this. We are going to make Canada safe. I promise you this. These laws are out of control. C-75 was never should have went down this road, unless that's what they wanted. Like, that's where you're creating this, Sean. Like, you are creating so much distrust and conspiracy. Like, how do you think you have good intention when this is what you're doing? It's crazy. Like, there's no other word to describe what this is other than crazy. Your priority is to go and find people to put them in jail for a Facebook post instead of enforcing freaking laws that we already have and ensuring that people who are murdering people aren't out on bail? Dude, like, it's like, quit. You said you wanted to go spend more time with your family. Do you remember that? Oh, but then Mark Carney decided he was going to run, so you saw that we're still going to have a job. You lied about that, and you're doing a terrible job protecting Canadians from violent criminals, and you're doing a terrible job standing up for victims.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Well, let me be clear on Stellantis. I'm extremely disappointed about this decision, and not only am I disappointed, it's completely unacceptable. So we will fight for these jobs. We will fight for the jobs at Brampton. We'll fight for the jobs that were committed by Stellantis, and we'll fight for our auto sector. I've been in contact with Lana Payne, the head of Unifor, yesterday and today. I've been in contact with Flavia Volpe, who's an important voice in the sector. We've been working hand in glove also with the Ford government, and we're one strong Team Canada together. And the company has commitments under different types of agreements with the government, including the fact that we provided support for the retooling of the very Brampton facility that right now is sitting idle. So we will make sure that we push the company and we hold them to account. And at the same time, what we want is we want to make sure that the workers are well treated, and their support needs to be extended by another year until 2027 at least. So we will continue to push, and we will continue to make sure that we're fighting for the jobs. And I'll continue to work night and day on this issue. I've had a conversation with the Prime Minister this morning and a conversation with Minister LeBlanc as well.
So I was wondering how you respond to Mr. Poilievre's comments.
I think this is not time to do politics. The time right now is absolutely to be one Team Canada. And when we faced really tough circumstances in the past, we were there united. In 2009, when the company was facing major financial difficulties, Canadians were there. And so we expect Stellantis now to be there for Canadians. And by the way, 150,000 cars made by Stellantis are sold every year in Canada. And so Canadians know what to do when a company doesn't necessarily have the interests of Canadians at stake. And finally, my last point is, of course we'll sit down with the company. Of course we will want to make sure that we can continue to work with them to see what can be done with the Brampton plant. I've said that to the Canadian CEO of Stellantis yesterday. I've reiterated our commitment to make sure that there are new models that can be built in Brampton at the Stellantis facility, because at the end of the day, we know that the Canadian workers are the best in line when it comes to the auto sector. So we heard through a phone call we had with the company yesterday. And so in these circumstances, the process in which that was done was actually something that we really didn't appreciate. And so we've been engaging with the company for months now, knowing that the Brampton facility was going to be retooled. We've invested millions of dollars in that facility based on the commitment that they would be investing in a new model. And so that's why.
Gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. So we had David Cochrane, like cheerleader of the CBC for the Liberals, who calls himself a journalist, and Melanie Joly. She calls herself a politician. I guess she is, technically. Let's take a look at this. Don't take any more dumb pills today. This is the only one you can afford. Let's go.
Prime Minister Mark Carney laid out new measures to protect Canadian steel and aluminum today, an industry facing tight pressure under U.S. tariffs now at 50%. If there's no deal between Canada and the U.S. at the end of the 30-day deadline discussed at the G7, Canada will impose counter tariffs on July 21st. In the meantime, there will be new procurement measures to encourage the use of domestic supply and a quota on foreign steel, limiting the amount of steel from countries without a trade agreement with Canada. The steel industry, however, says these measures fall short of what is needed. I'm joined now by Industry Minister Melanie Joly. Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming in today.
Good to see you, David. Thank you.
Let's start with the 30-day timeline before retaliation. What's your level of optimism that something will get done in the next 30 days or by the 16th of July?
This is a question that every single journalist asks me or the Prime Minister. And of course, my answer is always the same. We won't negotiate in public. We'll let the Prime Minister do his work. But I think, we have to make sure that we're continuing to negotiate, but we're ready also as we know, we're in a trade war. We know that the economy is the battlefield, and they're front lines right now. And I know you want to talk about that, but the front lines are steel, aluminum, and auto.
Right. But when, the U.S. ambassador, or the ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman and Dominic LeBlanc came out of the meetings at the G7 saying, we felt an acceleration, we've been told to accelerate it. When you set a deadline, either enough is enough and it's time to draw a line in the sand, or you think you can get something done by then, or both. How do you view it?
I'll let the folks in charge of the negotiation do their work. I think that indeed, as mentioned, we now have a clearer process. And at the same time, we're the country that has imposed the most counter tariffs. We're the country that is the biggest client of the U.S. because we buy more from the Americans than China, Japan, the UK, and France. So it gives us leverage. Our countermeasures are hurting in key states that are linked to President Trump's base, particularly red states. But at the same time, everybody doing the work of not buying American right now, making sure that we're supporting Canadian products and basically businesses and workers is fundamental. So I decided to leave the diplomatic front to go to the economic front of the trade war, and I'm seeing how much there's work to be done, and that's what we're doing right now.
Okay, there have already been hundreds of jobs lost in steel and more in aluminum. In this package outlined today, there's no direct specific measures for those workers. I know there have been changes made to EI previously to waive waiting periods and make it easier to qualify, but there are task force set up. I mean, how quickly are people going to see concrete measures there? Because there could be a lot of jobs lost in the next month.
There hasn't been layoffs on the aluminum side, and there's been some layoffs on the steel side. The two issues are completely different. Right. Okay, I've been in contact with all the three sectors, including auto, and they're all linked. But I must say, right now, the issue is much more in the steel sector. I've been in contact with the president of ArcelorMittal Dofasco, with the president of Stelco, the president of Algoma Steel this morning again in Sault Ste. Marie, and also with the president of many other different plants across the country. So I'm very open to their comments regarding making sure that there's not any form of dumping through different countries that could be third countries of steel that is basically being not following fair trade practices, to say the least. So we'll continue to have that conversation. Today was an important package. Why? Because it addresses the short, middle, and longer term issues. Short term, we need to close the market. How we do that? We're willing to continue to have conversations. The second is midterm liquidities and making sure that companies are able to get through the crisis. Conversations and negotiations have already started, particularly with some companies. And then longer term, it's the future of having steel in Canada. And for sure, we will have steel in Canada. It's fundamental to our economy. It's fundamental to our manufacturing sector. It's fundamental to our national security. We're doing three things. First, we will impose Canadian steel and aluminum in major projects. Second, in the defense procurement, absolutely. Canadian companies or foreign companies selling us defense procurement, defense equipment, will have to take Canadian steel and aluminum, and also we'll make sure that in our deals that to attract foreign direct investments, we'll put conditions into.
Right, but we have a statement from the Canadian steel producers and the United Steel Workers Union saying that they believe what is in this package today falls short of what our industry needs at this most challenging time. So like the point that with 700 plus steel jobs already gone, there's no sort of sector specific package for them beyond the EI changes. And they point to, as I understand it, some of the import restrictions on steel that the quota tariff rates, excuse me.
Tariffs, yes.
Yes, it limits imports from countries we don't have a trade agreement with to 2024 levels. They already feel the 2024 levels were pretty high, and some of the bad actors that they've pointed to in the past in sort of bringing in cheap steel and kind of dumping it here, South Korea, Vietnam, because they have trade agreements with Canada, they're not affected by this at all. So they're not getting kind of the protections they were looking for. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think we have to look at the details of this because we include also another condition that is the steel needs to be melted and poured in Canada.
Yes.
So that's also something that is that the industry needs to be able to assess.
This is the country of melt and pour issue.
Exactly.
So this is to stop like Chinese steel going through South Korea to get into Canada? Is it that sort of thing?
That's the idea. Now, what we want to do is to continue the conversations because, of course, we want to protect these jobs. Of course, we want to make sure that we have an industry, a steel industry. And my job as industry minister is to fight for these jobs and to fight for these plants. And that's what I'll do. I've been on the phone a lot over the past few days to make sure that we land at a good place. I understand that there's still concerns and we'll be in solution mode.
You know, the 30-day period, wherever this goes, I mean, the industry has been saying for a while that it's potentially thousands of jobs that could start to go in that time frame if the 50% tariffs aren't lifted, because they lost a few hundred at 25, but after that, it's not linear, it's exponential, and their ability to ride it out is extremely limited.
Yeah, you're talking about 30-day for countermeasures, which is different. We're talking about much more closing or limiting the market to make sure that we have a stronger domestic market to protect our plants.
I understand, but those are medium-term to long-term solutions in some cases, like the defense procurement. Like Algoma, more than half of its product goes into the U.S., right? So at a 50% tariff, it's just not sustainable.
So I hear you. And clearly what the U.S. is doing is completely unacceptable. And we will fight these tariffs because they're completely legal, they're completely unjustified. And so that's why we need to make sure that we get to a good place to protect our domestic market, like I was mentioning, on the quotas. I think that, and I think we're getting to a good place. I'm quite positive. And I think we can get to a good place very quickly. I think also that some plants had issues before this crisis and need to be helped, and we will help them. And at the same time, we need to be prepared for many scenarios as the geopolitics of this and the unpredictability.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Side of COVID. Meanwhile, record mortgage defaults and soaring food prices are forcing even full-time workers to rely on food banks. When will the Liberals admit the harm of their policies have caused and table a budget that gets General Dynamics employees back to work?
Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, we will create jobs in this country. We will invest in our manufacturing sector. We will invest in the steel and aluminum sector. And that is why the announcement that the Prime Minister did today is pivotal. It will create jobs across different industries, including at GDLS, including in his riding. And we will also make sure that we build Canada through national major projects. That's why we need to support the bill that is called One Canadian.
Présentement, il y a une crise, pardon. Sorry. Présentement, il y a une crise, pardon.
Producers say that in first
in the Macarena, telling people to chill out. She is such a gong show, man. It's pretty funny.
The Contrecoeur plant in Quebec. These were exactly the conversations.
Industry. The members' riding are extremely important, and I look forward to working with him to make sure that they're saved and protected. And we should all be working together as people across the country are looking at this.
F.
Here, here.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadians.
Oh, yeah.
All right, gang, to wrap this one up, to see all the familiar faces looking so much younger. Politics must age you.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday, the Liberal chair of the Heritage Committee was awfully concerned that
Producers say that in first CEO producers.
Oh, yeah.
Gang, what's up? Aaron right here. Canadian Looney. Should be a pretty fun one. We've got Melanie Joly, and she's zipping along, guys, dancing, doing the Macarena, telling people to chill out. She is such a gong show, man. It's pretty funny. Let's get into this video, though. See old Melanie Joly. How is she making?
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to react on the steel and aluminum tariffs and the decision by the White House yesterday night. You've heard the Prime Minister. These tariffs are completely unacceptable. They're unjustified, they're unlawful, and we'll make sure that we fight against them. Meanwhile, I've been in close contact with lots of CEOs, at least 10 of them, from the steel and aluminum sectors yesterday night and this morning, and also with major labor organizations from Unifor to steelworkers or La FTQ. We know that people are anxious, and we know that lots of communities are impacted by these tariffs. That's why what we're doing right now is we'll continue to fight against them. We'll make sure also that we continue to negotiate with the Americans a security and trade partnership. The Prime Minister had alluded to that earlier today, and at the same time, Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of the U.S.-Canada Trade, was in Washington yesterday. And finally, we know that meanwhile, what we need to do here in Canada is we need to build. We need to create jobs in the country. We need to make sure that ultimately we create a very strong domestic market and we create jobs. And that's what we'll do. We'll make sure to do that through major projects, major infrastructure projects, and we will do that also investing in our defense sector, creating jobs here at home that, of course, will have an impact on the steel and aluminum workers. I will be taking your questions, but before, allow me to say this in French. So, there's lots of noise here in Parliament, lots of action. Okay.
With the idea of, what about the idea of, and by the way, it was Minister Champagne making all that noise.
You said it, I didn't say it.
What about
I recognize the voice.
The concept of dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs? At one point in the campaign, the leader, Mark Carney, was talking about that. Why not dollar for dollar tariffs today?
So I don't know if it was you or somebody else asked him already the question. It is an important question. We have had really strong counter tariffs against the Americans already. With China and now newly Mexico, we've imposed important counter tariffs. We will make sure that we impose maximum pain to the U.S. while having minimum pain, minimum impact to Canadians. We are looking at different scenarios right now, and we will take a decision, but we need a bit more time right now, not too long. But of course, what is fundamental is we need to make sure that in everything we do, we're able to get to the best deal with the Americans, but at the same time that we're able to create and protect jobs here in the country.
Steel producers say that steel producers say that fast-tracking infrastructure projects is a medium-term fix, not a short-term one, and we need something done immediately. They suggested
that's a very good question.
Hiking tariffs on China as a result and other unfair traders.
No, that's a very good question. Why? Because that's exactly what lots of CEOs have said, because obviously lots of companies will have to decide what they do in their coming weeks. Tomorrow is Steel Day on the Hill. I will be meeting with the heads of many steel organizations here in the country. Yesterday, the Prime Minister and I had a meeting with the global CEO of ArcelorMittal, who's owns the ArcelorMittal Dofasco steel in Hamilton, and also the Contrecoeur plant in Quebec. These were exactly the conversations. How can we make sure that we protect jobs? How we make sure that we protect investments? And how can we be in solution mode at the government level? So I'm willing to have these conversations with these decision makers, because we need to make sure to be there as a government to ultimately protect the jobs.
We learned that Premier Ford is undermining the Prime Minister right now. He was on American TV saying that he's demanded retaliatory tariffs to the Prime Minister. He's talking to reporters saying that the Prime Minister is being steamrolled by Trump.
So if my colleague Dominique Leblanc was answering you this question, he would say we're all in Team Canada. And of course, that's what we'll do. But the other thing is it's fundamental that we fight against these tariffs. We've said it from day one, and we'll continue to do so. This was also an important question during the elections. Canadians gave us the mandate to negotiate with the Americans, but at the same time to make sure that we would build the strongest economy of the G7, and that's exactly what we'll do.
You see some of the revenues from the tariffs? When? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. The boss. Yeah. Have a good.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier that afternoon in the House of Commons, this is Melanie Joly dancing up a storm.
The Prime Minister has gone soft. What was the entire Liberal campaign based on? Just theatre?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
The members' riding are extremely important, and I look forward to working with him to make sure that they're saved and protected. And we should all be working together as people across the country are looking at this government and these politicians, because this trade war that was launched against Canada is existential, and it is putting livelihoods of thousands of Canadians at risk. So
hi everyone, good morning. What a great day for Canada.
What? It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Elbows up. Elbows up.
Had no interest in playing the puck, and he leaned into...
Look, I don't think one needs to respond to every comment. Look, Stephanie, I comply with the rules.
Conflicts of interest.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will.
WTF.
Here, here.
The one we call Canadians.
You should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper bumper, stomper boo, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Bing bong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Ding dong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Tip tap, pitter pat, granny cat too. Rooty toot, Kimble, loopy loo. Bobbity stompity, romper room and friends.
Thank you all for watching. We're out.